commonly known as the phenomenon. You know, people like to call them aliens. I understand them as interdimensional beings. Also, in my experience, it's like once you see something that one time for the rest of your life, that doorway is open. Eventually, they get close enough and he can see that they are 3 to 4 foot tall beings. They have glowing red eyes, and the being telepathically communicates to him, "You don't understand. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you." They understand her to be a godlike race of beings that manifest reality purely from thought. He's like, "Oh my God, this is a full CE4 abduction case." And then they showed him a massive golden orb, and they said that it's on its way towards us and then it's returning. We have a team of remote viewers, psychic spies, who are sitting in a dark room at all times, spying on you psychically. And he reaches out to touch it, and then when he touches it, next thing he knows, he's in a dark room, and there's stars all around him. See, in the intelligence circles, we became known as the Skinwalker Ranch of the East. He walks out to the backyard, and there's this being there, one of the really tall ones. And it hands him this thing, and it says,
Yeah, last night was pretty mind-blowing, dude. Yeah, like what was that? What do we see? So we went out, so we've got a couple of 100 acres that we've actually purchased for conservation purposes in Parrish, Florida. And so we went out there last night. What did we see? What happened?
okay, so yeah, let me just slightly back up and set that stage. So you reached out to me in March, and you were like, you know, you got to come out and do the show. And I was like, I would love to, but first we need to skywatch,
Yeah,
right?
critical.
That's something that my dad and I, who, you know, we'll get into who he is in a little bit, but that's something that my dad and I have started doing is when we record with people, we like to skywatch before. So kind of been setting this stage now for, I don't know, 9 months, right? We've been planning this. Time flies, I guess. But so yeah, so to get to last night, we go out to your property, and my goal was that we would see what we saw, because I like, for the purpose of recording, that we can somewhat be on the same page. It's exhausting to try to say, okay, you know, you got to believe me. I see this thing, right? So now you've seen. But what we saw was what is commonly known as the phenomenon. You know, people like to call them aliens. People like to call them whatever they want to call them. I understand them as interdimensional beings, beings of, I don't know, you could say maybe in spiritual terms, like a higher vibration or a higher frequency. Maybe something I like to call them is like beings of light, because as you see, they appear as light. And what we saw last night, for the most part, was way far away up in the sky, right? Yeah, way up there. And what we have observed over the last 18 years, as of next month, January 8th, it'll be 18 years since our initial encounter started. What we've observed over these 18 years is that those lights way up there in the sky can zoom down really fast and be face to face. And these lights can change, where they go from being this luminous orb to all of a sudden it's a little 3 or 4 foot tall being, or even a 9 or 10 foot tall being. And they can change into any shape. Like, for example, my mom last year saw a massive orb right over one of our properties. So beside my mom and dad's cabin, they have a tiny home that my sister lived in for a while. And she saw one in the shape of a cross, like a Templar cross, believe it or not, which is funny because we were just talking about Templars. But it was like a even, you know, like a perfectly symmetrical cross. We've seen them look all kinds of strange ways. But
What color was the cross?
I want to say it was white. I wasn't there, but just hearing the story, you know. And anyway, you know, we'll get back to last night, but I want to say, like, we've just seen them appear in the strangest ways. Seen them inside, seen them outside, ground level. We see them flash in the trees, in the forest, whatever. So last night was great, man. I was very excited about last night. Just felt very, very relieved. I had a little bit of pressure, not because of you, but just because it can be daunting to, you know, fly across the country, and then it's like, okay, we gotta put our thoughts together and see something here, and it's like, what if we don't, you know? And it's always that pressure in the back of my head, like, well, you know, like I said, what if we don't? So we get there and we're just kind of catching up, hour before dark, and sure enough, right at dusk, they just start appearing, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, what do we, like, we saw like 50 things. Yeah. 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 It's crazy. It's crazy. So, I mean, some of the stuff you just can't explain. I mean, you know, it wasn't airplanes. It wasn't like, you know, that this could be classified as like an airplane or a helicopter. I mean, we saw plenty of airplanes. We know what airplanes look like. They blink, you know, but this stuff was very unique and very different. You know, satellites, I think, could be something that a lot of people are debunking, or like, oh, that's, you guys are just seeing satellites. I think if we had a skeptic out there, they probably could have said satellite for a lot of the, you know, the phenomenon, but not all of it, for sure. Even the skeptics would have to say that some of this stuff was unexplainable. Ryan was out there with us. Ryan, I want to ask him about his thoughts in a second. We'll have him come on the mic, but yeah, it was crazy, man. I mean, for me, I think the one that was the most incredible, the most unique, the most unlike anything that I'd ever seen was the 3 orbs, or whatever you want to call them, little balls of light that were moving in a formation, that were moving in a triangle formation, almost directly above us. And they were about the size of a star, you know, that almost looked like what a star might look like, but slightly different tint to the color. We did see a couple of green ones, which was very strange. The triangle formation was not green. That was like a more of a whitish light. But and so, you know, if you say that's a satellite, satellites don't move in a formation like that. Like, you don't have like 2 satellites, one behind the next moving in a formation, and one directly above in like in a triangle pattern. They just don't. And then satellites you can see go all the way across the horizon and all the way across the sky. These would come in and out of view, and those 3 specifically were up there for 10 or 12 seconds and then just vanished, you know, and that's not my experience with satellites. So that one for me was super cool and super compelling, but we saw a lot of stuff last night.
I love it. I love that you're so mind blown by the triangle formation, because then, you know, Ryan is mind blown by one that did a strange maneuver in the shape of a wiggle. I was mind blown by the one that was the orange light that kept, you know, it's starting above the tree line, and then it rises up, and then it would disappear, and then it would reappear back at the tree line and rise up and disappear. And it did it like anywhere from 5 to 6 times, you know? And then on the finale of it, after watching it for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, appearing and reappearing, and it splits into 2 and flies in different directions. So like, the beautiful thing about last night is we all had a different perspective. We were all mind blown, but by different things. You know, and that almost speaks to how the phenomenon works, that it's doing every little thing that it can to, okay, you know, Matt needs his mind blown, so let's do something that'll relate to him. Yeah. Okay, now it's Ryan's turn, you know, now it's my turn. And that's kind of how it works in our experience, that it's a consciousness-based thing, that they interact with you on a personal level. Now, for someone out there who's never seen anything, that might be hard to imagine, but also, in my experience, it's like once you see something that one time for the rest of your life, that doorway is open, and you can see things. Like, as you're going to find out, you're going to be able to see things. Maybe you're walking out to take your trash out or something, and there's something up there. Or maybe you have a small group of people that want to see, and you kind of do the same method that we did last night, which is, you know, it's no smoke and mirrors. It's pretty simple process, just, you know, connecting in your thoughts, and next thing you know, you're going to be seeing more things.
Yeah, and you've done this, what, 1,000 times? I mean, you've gone sky watching with groups of people, like hundreds of, if not 1,000 times, and the feedback from the people that you've connected with in the past is that they still have the ability to see stuff days, months, years after their experience with you. Is that correct?
Forever.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Definitely have done it hundreds of times, but have seen thousands of things. I mean, just like, think about it. Like, last night we saw, you know, easily, my generous estimate is anywhere from 50 to 70 lights, you know, just not counting. It's popping off one after the other, and maybe there's a lull for 20 minutes, and then, you know, we see another 5, and maybe 50 to 70. Imagine our little family for 18 years. My dad going out as many as 5, 6, 7 nights a week when he's, in his routine, and seeing 50 to 75 nights a week. I mean, do the math. It's thousands. And, the more you interact with it, the more I feel like you learn about the way that they seem to communicate. And what we've noticed is that, and I think you might have noticed this last night, that sometimes you'll be talking about certain things, or you'll say very specific things, and then they appear, or they flash, or they streak, or they split and, go in different directions, or they take a right angle turn, and that's kind of how we've learned about them, is through trial and error. I mean, we didn't always know exactly, what we were doing, or I can remember, like, when we were children, we would go out there with my dad, and I had this feeling of longing. Like Ryan last night told my sister, when the three of us walked back to the car for a moment to get more gear to, layer up, Ryan and my sister were talking. And my sister said that Ryan said, and I hope it's okay to share this, but I thought it was amazing. He said, when I saw that thing that wiggled, I felt at first a moment of fear, but then I felt a longing. Like I'm connecting with something that maybe I've longed for, and that's how I felt growing up seeing this thing. Like maybe 2 or 3 months would go by and we wouldn't see anything. And I would always feel this longing, like, wow, is it ever going to come back? Am I ever going to see it again? And now it's like, all right, Matt, be there at 5:30. And then before dark, it's like, we see 20 lights, and it's just, it's crazy, the progression of this thing over time. But
yeah. Ryan, do you want to jump in and tell us your thoughts about what you saw last night?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And Ryan kind of alluded to it a little bit there, but to set the stage, we're out there, it's dark, we're able to, start seeing things moving across the sky. And we're, as a group, we're seeing these things appear and disappear and not really understanding what they are. But there was one instance where I was looking straight up and was tracking something moving from north to south, right at the center of the, right straight up. And then it started to zigzag. And these tight little left and right zigzag patterns. And here's the thing, for everyone listening, I'm a science fiction nerd, just 100%. Our satellites can't do that. They can do that over a long period of time, but they can't do that in such quick patterns. And watching that and realizing your brain, the first feeling that comes up is fear. The hell is that? What? I don't know what that is. What is that? And there's fear. And then when you kind of open your mind up to it a little bit, you almost get this, you want to know more about it. And as we were watching this thing move in this, quite zigzag pattern and almost kind of a snake type pattern as well, it disappears. And then as soon as it disappears, you have the sense of longing. Like Ryan mentioned earlier, you want to see more of it. You want to experience it again. And it's almost kind of, I was telling his sister that, come back. I want to see more, come back. I want to understand. I want to learn a little bit more. But, that first feeling that you get is fear. And I think that's natural. That's a human reaction to something you don't understand. But immediately afterwards, if you're open to it and you kind of open your mind and accept that what you're seeing you can't explain, you want to learn more, you want to connect more. And as soon as it disappears, you get that longing. So
come back, but not too close, right?
Oh no, I want him to land right in front of me, Matt. We're going on an adventure.
Okay,
we are going on an adventure.
I don't think that's what he said last night. But.
Oh no, I would not to be too crude, but all of you are nice people, but I would push you down to run towards a spaceship.
Okay.
Just to be honest.
Fair enough. Cool. Thank you for sharing, Ryan. Appreciate it, man. So Ryan, when did you start? Like, what was let's talk about the story a bit, and kind of like the past. Like, when did all of this start for you and your family?
So it started in January of 2007. I always get like a little bit of a hard time trying to remember the date because I know it was Elvis's birthday. So that's January 8th, 2007. Right. So, yeah, I have to think about it. I get the numbers switched, but so January 8th, right? Just to set the stage here for what was going on in our lives leading up to this. After 9/11, as I'm sure you could imagine, in a military town, we lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where my father still lives. And he was a very successful contractor in the house building business, Bledsoe Construction. And he was selling, like, I don't know. So, I mean, I was a kid, but I would imagine, I think he always says like 100 homes a year, some crazy, amount, just very successful business. And, lots of employees, lots of responsibility, and a lot of stress on his shoulders. And not to mention, he also employed a lot of family, my mom's side and my dad's side, cousins, some of my mom's siblings. And it was just the stress on his shoulders that he had to provide for a lot of people, And then after 9/11, and we started the whole war on terror thing, the housing market, especially in our town, because it's military, basically crashed. And then, as you know, in 2008, we had the whole financial collapse of like everything, So it was just like tough times for us in those few years. And the outcome for our family was just before 2007, we pretty much ended up going bankrupt. My siblings and I were really young. I was 11, 12. My sister was like 9, 10, and my brothers were also teenagers. And my dad had Crohn's disease at the time. So anytime he would face extreme stress, it would flare up, and it would just it was like this feedback loop where he would get more mentally stressed and anxious because of the Crohn's, and his body's hurting and he's suffering this debilitating disease. And it was this horrible, vicious cycle. And, long story short, he ended up selling the business. And we were just down and out, we were not doing so good financially, and we had to move across town from our fancy, $1 million house in a gated community to a renovated double wide trailer out in the country by my grandpa. And it was just a lot of tumultuous change, right? So my dad was just feeling very, very depressed, like he couldn't provide for his children, like he basically didn't want to live anymore, if I'm being blunt. He was very much struggling. So he was out of work for like a year, I think, because he just had so much debilitating physical illness and anguish and depression from selling the business, that he gets this job, and he goes and he works this job with a small group of contractors, 3 men and my brother. And they go and they stay out of town for, I don't know, like 2 or 3 months or something. And they get back and they finish the job January. So they want to celebrate. So they're like, let's go fishing. And Dad is really not feeling like fishing, but he wants to show his friends a good time, and my brother. So they go out to the Cape Fear River on this cold winter night, and they're all, bundled up in their coats, and they go out and they start a little fire by the river, and they're fishing. And my dad is just really, really depressed. He's not enjoying it, and he's also a pretty, my dad's not, believe it or not, if anybody's ever like heard interviews of him or whatever, he kind of like has to talk. He's really not much of a talker. Like he's kind of in his head. He likes to think things through, and
he's a contemplator.
Yes,
yeah,
very much so. He's very much like a philosopher, and he just kind of wanted to be by himself. And he walked away, and he's just kind of thinking things through, and where he's at in life and how unhappy he is, and he's just basically away from the group, and he's kind of talking to God. He's like, God, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't go on like this anymore. I can't even provide for my children. We're suffering. There's got to be a change. Like, either take me out of here or heal me. I can't go on like this anymore. So he's just kind of putting that out there. He walks away from the group, and just a little bit of like physical detail about where they're at. We are out in the country of Fayetteville, North Carolina, on the south side of town. And it's this like really, really country road highway. And when you turn off the highway and go back into this little residential area, it's like miles and miles of just, there's fields and there's woods, and it's very dark, and there's not really like much street lights out there at the time. I mean, we're talking 20 years ago here, and it's just very remote is what I'm getting at. Very kind of secluded. Very rural, right? And when you turn into this property to go to this embankment where they're fishing, it's like 100, 150, maybe 200 yards even from the road to get back to the entrance through a field. And then you get to this little private gate, and then you go down into the woods. And the path to get to this spot is so narrow that only one vehicle can go in or out at one time. And then there's like this half-mile long kind of like decline into the woods. And then you take a right turn and you go even deeper into the woods. It's all private land. And
how many acres are around were they?
I couldn't tell you. It's big though. It's big. Yeah. And definitely hundreds of acres, right? And you go, then you take that right turn, you go deeper into the forest. It's all surrounded by forest, right? With this one narrow trail. And then you go maybe like another quarter mile and you're deep in the woods, but there's like this huge semicircle clearing, and it's the Cape Fear River, which is like kind of a famous North Carolina river. It's like 100 miles long. It goes from pretty much each end of the state right into the ocean, right? So they're fishing in a very remote place. That's the point I'm getting at. So Dad leaves this group and he walks back up that trail on foot. He's about a half mile away from the group by foot through the forest. And as he starts to walk this trail, he starts to get really unnerved because he begins to hear these rustling sound in the bushes. And he's like, whoa, his hair stands up on end. He gets down on his hands and knees. He's looking in the bushes. He's like, is it a turkey? Is it a fox or something? He's not sure, but he was very unnerved at the way that the sound was happening, because he's very acclimated to being deep in the woods, you know, at night, 5 a.m, 4 a.m, before dawn with a rifle hunting deer or bear or whatever. He grew up that way. He's hunted, thousands of times, and he's not scared of being alone at night in the woods. So this moment really unnerved him. Just the unnatural kind of sound of whatever was in the bushes. So he's walking up this trail. He keeps hearing the rustling sound for a good like half mile or whatever. He stops, it stops, and he can't find what it is. So then he keeps going. He gets to the top of the trail where, the gate is to drive into the trail. And when he comes to the top of that hill, he sees these two supermassive, like huge, like as big as you see the sun on the horizon, he sees two of them, orange, reddish balls of fire. And his immediate thought is, that's not the sun. There's two of them. He panics. He's thinking, oh my God, it's, alien invasion, whatever. He doesn't know what it is, right? So he turns to run, but he looks back one more time and a third one shoots up beside them. The next thing he remembers is he's back at the campfire. The fire's out. The truck is moved. The fishing poles are all packed up and they're not fishing anymore. And they're like, Chris, where have you been? Where have you been? We've been looking for you. He's like, I've only been gone 15 minutes. I got to tell you about what I just saw, right? And they're freaking out. Where's Junior? We can't find him. He's been missing for hours too. And Dad's not putting the picture together that there was a lapse in his awareness,
Lost time.
Lost time, yeah. So he starts to look for my brother, Junior. And he goes a little bit into the woods in a different direction. He finds my brother. And my brother kind of like unites with my dad, and they're freaking out. Dad's like, I just saw these UFOs. And my brother's like, Dad, I've been seeing these beings, and he's just, pandemonium is starting to set in. The other guys are like, okay, you guys got to stop messing around. Like, this isn't funny. So I'm going to slightly back up.
And Chris Jr. was 17 at the time?
He's 17.
Okay.
So Chris Jr., at some point in the 4 hours that my dad was missing, decides he wants to kind of wander off on his own. And, he walks into the woods in a different direction, and he starts to see these two red lights bobbing through the forest. They're just kind of gently bouncing, right? But they're at ground level. And as they get closer, they split into 4 red lights, and they're bobbing closer. And eventually they get close enough, and he can see that they are 3 to 4 foot tall beings. They have glowing red eyes, right? And I'm going to do a little demonstration, but their eyes moved in an unnatural way, kind of like a camera shutter. Like they would close, like one would close and then the other one would close. They wouldn't blink at the same time, right? And they were translucent, but they were glowing. They described them kind of as like the pale moon, like that color, that kind of whitish yellow color. And they had a triangle on their chest, which is...
What color was the triangle?
I don't know. I never asked.
Okay.
I never honestly thought about that.
I wasn't sure what to paint my hoodie this morning, but I went with green.
Yeah, I mean, it's a solid choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they had a little triangle on their chest. And when they were close enough to my brother to where they were like locking eyes, my brother was, for lack of better words, he was paralyzed. And to this day, he's not sure if they were paralyzing him or if he was in so much shock that he was in fear. I mean, we can't honestly know why, but he was frozen. He couldn't scream, he couldn't cry, he couldn't shout. And for about 2 hours, he sat there in that state, just in paralysis. One of these beings at all times was making eye contact with my brother. And then the other one was observing, maybe he's picking up sticks, he's picking up bottles, he's picking up cans, trash in the woods. Yeah, just kind of looking around. And one of them is just staring at him at all times. So then to kind of get back to the present, so to speak, timeline of events, my dad reunites with the group. And when he finds my brother, the little red-eyed beings dive into like a bundle of sticks or a tree stump or something. They just kind of hop in it and disappear. And then my brother snaps to and he can move. But he looks back and he sees the little red eyes peering at him from whatever they jumped into. Like a thorny bush or something. Some really big, massive sticks. And so my brother's freaking out. He's crying. He's just, 17, right? I mean, what was it like seeing that stuff last night, going into it, expecting to see something? It was still like, whoa, don't come closer. Imagine being 17, and you're face to face with some sort of glowing, strange, 4-foot tall entity. I mean, he was freaked out and he's telling Dad, there's these creatures in the woods, there's aliens. My dad's like, I saw these UFOs. So the other guys are freaking out and they're like, stop playing, And then after everybody's kind of shouting and pandemonium is starting to settle in, one of the guys shouts, look, and they look up and there's like 8 or 9 lights that look like stationary stars suddenly start scrambling around in the sky, like in a very fast, rapid motion. And then a few of them just like shoot down rapidly and land on the other side of the river in the forest. And they see this white light like glowing in the forest, super massive, like a craft. They jump in the truck and they start getting out of there. They all drove in one truck. My dad picked everybody up. So Dad's driving them out of there. And later, because my dad was driving, I'm not sure where my brother was in the car, but I don't know if he saw this or if he did see it and he corroborated it with the other guys. I don't know, but I know my dad didn't see it, right? So he didn't report this. But the other guys turned around and looked when they were driving, and one of those little beings was running fast on all fours, and it jumped up and it grabbed the back of the truck and it disappeared.
Oh my God.
So I think that came out when we were doing like the Discovery Channel documentary or something. And that was kind of like a surprising detail because for a year and a half or so, we had like known our dad's version of the story, but I had never talked to these other guys. And then they came and they told like their perspective of it. And we were like, whoa,
wow.
Like it was kind of a cool detail that came later. But
so what your brother saw before the beings was lights that were bouncing, 2 lights that split into 4. So is it his thought, your guys' thought, that somehow the lights transformed into the beings, that it was like that somehow they transformed?
I've genuinely never thought about that. That's a great question. The way we've kind of always understood it is just when they were far enough away, maybe they're, because their eyes are close together, it looked like one light. And then as they got closer, you could see that it was 2 eyes per being. I don't know. Maybe they did start off as an orb and they came out of it. I mean, they certainly can do that, and we've seen it many times, but I never really thought about that. That is interesting to think about.
I'll have to ask your brother at some point.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'll ask him. But so they're driving out of there. They're freaking out, and these 3 contractors, they are like fighting over who gets to see their wife and kids one last time. Before the end of the world, because they're thinking it's an alien invasion, right? They're thinking and we live near an Air Force base and an Army base, Fort Bragg. Well, it's Fort Liberty now, but it used to be Fort Bragg. And so they're thinking, where are the fighter jets? Where are the helicopters? Nothing. And they're driving out of there. They're all fighting. I got to get home first. Take me home first, and they're freaking out. And my dad always describes it like the Dukes of Hazzard. Like when they get to the top of the hill, they were like airborne. They're going so fast, and they land on the the flat surface after, leaving the trail. And when they get to the top and they're out of this wooded trail and they're kind of like back on the road that leads to the highway, this wide open field, they see one of these craft, one of these big white lights, and it's hovering just above the ground in front of the vehicle on the trail, and they have to like slam to a halt. And they're like, oh my God, what do we do? Before I go forward, I want to describe what it looked like. It was super massive, like maybe like a school bus, if you could imagine that length, and like that length, and then that would be like kind of the height of it. But the shape was sort of like my dad always described it like a football or like a teardrop, kind of very ovular, not perfectly round, not like a saucer, but more like a teardrop. But it was pure white light. And it had these spikes on it. Not like, sharp pointy spikes, but it was like spikes of light. And they kind of rotated all around it like it was living, like some strange eldritch thing, if you're familiar with eldritch. Eldritch is a concept by H.P. Lovecraft, which is like a early 1900s. It's like a very famous American horror author who came up with this concept that sometimes you can see things that baffle the brain. It's like eldritch. It's like kind of like cosmic, right? Like you see something that the brain doesn't know how to like DMT. It's foreign to the mind, so it's shocking and it kind of baffles your perception, and you don't really understand what you're looking at. It defies rationale. It defies physical laws. Oh, there you go. Yeah, eldritch horror, subgenre of horror, unknowable and incomprehensible, right? So what they're seeing is incomprehensible. It has these rotating spikes of light, and it's just very strange, and they're stunned.
Did the craft have like a physical form, a physical shell, or was it like a light-based craft?
It's light-based.
Light-based craft, okay.
Yeah. And then it just kind of slowly hovers up over the truck and just goes away. It just ascends. And they kind of all grew up in this community their whole lives, so they know a lot of people. They know, who's in all these trailers out there. So they have the idea to go knock on one of them to see if they get some help, see if anybody's home. And the storm door is closed, but the main door's open, so they can see into this trailer. They know who lives there. The lights are on. The cars are home. And they go and they bang on the door, and nobody's there. Nobody's coming to answer the door. And they're like, this is weird. Like, everybody's home, the door's open, but nobody hears us, screaming and bang. That's how they explain it to me. Like, no one heard us screaming. No one heard us, whatever.
Did they see people in the house?
Funnily enough, I want to say it was, I'm gonna hold off on using last names because they prefer to remain anonymous. But I think it was Donnie told me when I was a kid that when he looked through this storm door, he saw the people that lived there sitting on the couch, and they were just like staring at the TV, like just glass eyes.
Wow.
Like they were just completely like locked into the TV, like they were hypnotized.
Yeah.
And that's a great question. No one's ever asked that.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, hard to go into that detail. But yeah, Donnie told me he saw them. They were just sitting there like they were just hypnotized. Like
wow.
they wouldn't move. They're banging on the door, And so they get the hint, right, that this is weird. And they're all freaking out thinking it's the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right. So they get back in the truck and they start driving home, right? And about a half mile around this curve down the street, there's this kind of like locally famous dead man's curve where a lot of people die. That's why it's called a dead man's curve, right? Because it's so steep a curve that if you're going too fast, your car will flip. They get to that point where it's like you either take this turn on the dead man's curve or you take a left to go back to like where we live. Dad sees another one of these craft, but it's floating above the spot where his first wife actually died on that dead man's curve in 1983. And this is in the book. I think it's like the second chapter or the third chapter of my dad's book. But yeah, he was married before in the 1980s. He was really young. He was like, I don't know, like 19 or 20 or something, 21 maybe. And they were married for 11 months, and she died in his arms.
Oh.
They had a bad night where they kind of took off in separate cars, and They were driving, and she was obviously really upset, and she was driving way too fast. And she took the dead man's curve, and she tumbled the car right. And my dad came around that curve, and he doesn't know that it's her, and he sees. Obviously, it's really dark too. I mean, we're talking way out in the country. There's not like streetlights around. He sees a car. It's on. The tires are spinning. And he starts to walk up in the yard to try to see if he can help whoever this is. And he stumbles on her body, and he looks down, and it's his wife. And he picks her up. My dad doesn't really like to go into this detail, but it was very traumatic for him, as you could imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Being a 20 to 21-year-old guy and your wife dies in your arms, I mean, you know, she was mangled. And the people come out of the house, and they're like freaking out. They call the cops, whatever. But anyway, so that was a very traumatic thing for my dad all those years ago, and he suffered the horror of the guilt and just the torment in his nightmares about the loss of his wife when she was young. And the craft was hovering over the spot where she died.
Wow.
And my dad slams to a stop, and he's sitting there in the road at a dead stop just looking at it, and he's just thinking, like, he has this sensation like she's okay. Like, you know, it's obviously connected to her spot where she died, and he had this sense that it was telling him something, that it's okay. And it actually really helped him to let go of that guilt from that point on. It's important to note that before I go forward, there is an element of the story that I haven't mentioned yet, but that when Dad saw the lights on the horizon that first time, he was obviously afraid. He was very afraid. He turned to run. He looks back. He sees the third one. And then next thing he remembers, right? Because he had missing time. But I'm going to get into this a little bit later if you would like. But while he had that missing time, when he was on board this craft, the beings told him a sequence of things. And then another thing that they did was they took away his fear. And they assured him, we are only here to help. We are watching after your son. He's safe. Because my dad's crying, where's my son? Where's my son? And they're like, he's safe. We're watching him, right? So when he came back to the campfire after being missing for 4 hours, now my dad was not conscious of any of that was discussed on this craft. He was not conscious that he was even missing time for a good year and a half when the Discovery Channel and MUFON brought in a Harvard hypnotist to do regression therapy. So every time somebody was like, you were missing for 4 hours, my dad didn't consider it. He didn't understand, it didn't click with him. But anyway, so back to where I was, when they're driving on the road and he sees this craft hovering over the spot where his first wife died, he wasn't afraid. Everybody else is freaking out. We got to get home. My dad was at peace. He's looking at it. When the thing is in front of the truck, my dad's at peace. He's looking at it and he's fine. He's obviously freaked out a little bit, but he wasn't afraid anymore. So he wanted to keep looking at it, and he just was having this sense that they were telling him something, to move on, that it's okay. And the other guys are like, oh, get the hell out of here. So he picks up, he goes, he drops them all off, right? And he gets to the house with my brother. My mom and my other brother, Jeremy, and then my sister, Emily, and I were staying across town, about a 25-minute drive with my mother's mother for the time. So my dad and my brother get home, and it's just them, and they are obviously very freaked out. They're very alert, and my brother is just in hysterics. They're turning on all the lights, they're shutting on the blinds, they're locking all the doors, they're turning on the news, trying to see when's the invasion force going to fight back from the military. They're getting all their guns, and they're kind of like locked in, you know what I mean? And they're just figuring out, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Whatever. And they start hearing these dogs. My grandpa, who was our next door neighbor, had this huge hunting kennel with like 15 to 20 dogs. And they just start going berserk, just growling and howling. And my dad is freaking out. Oh no, someone's trying to rob the shed. There's somebody in our yard. My brother's like, no, Dad, don't go out there. Don't go out there. So my dad goes out there, and my brother goes with him because he doesn't want to be alone. And my dad goes out the door to the left into my grandfather's backyard and then to the kennel, or towards the kennel, to see if there's somebody over there in the shed, robbing it. And they don't see anybody. So my dad and also our dog, Rozz, was beside my dad. So they're in the woods in our backyard, and Dad's like, all right, look, I'm going to sick the dog this way through the forest, and we're going to go around to the right and see if whatever's in there moving. Because the dog was locked in the woods, our dog, our personal dog. It was kind of like indicating there was something in there, you know?
But they were thinking more that this is human activity as opposed to alien activity.
My dad was.
Okay.
Yeah. And my dad's like, all right, I'm going to sick the dog here, and we're going to run around here to the right around the woods, and we're going to catch him. So my dad sicks the dog, and he starts sprinting to the right. My brother's with him, and then when he takes that left turn in our backyard, we had a pretty big yard too, like 6 acres. So he starts running to the back of our yard, and he turns around. He sees my brother's running back to the house. He couldn't take it anymore. You know, he's obviously very stressed. So he runs back home. So my dad's alone. He's running. When he gets to the back of our yard, he sees the same little glowing being that my brother saw, and it's glowing bright like the moon, and it's standing there under a tree. Like there's this kind of tree with a very horizontal limb. It was standing under it, and that's an important detail for later. But Dad stops and he says, okay, you got me, you know? And the being telepathically communicates to him, you don't understand, we're not here to hurt you, we're here to help you. Then the dog shows up behind it after it was, you know, going its way through the woods, and it vanishes. So my dad goes back to the house, and that's kind of the end of the original night.
Okay. That's a big night.
And, yeah. And there's a little more to it as well. So it was either the next night or the following night. They had another thing where, actually, let me back up. There was one more thing. When my dad gets back to the house that original night, after seeing the little glowing being, he looks out the window one more time, and he sees like a 8 to 9 foot tall being walking through the yard. Close the blinds. He's like, it freaked him out, right? That was the first thing that really scared him there. But okay, so then the next night or the following night, there was one more thing, and he sees a glow out in the backyard, and my brother's like, don't go out there, don't go out there. So my dad's tired of my brother living in torment over those few days, and he takes a rifle out there. He's like, whatever it is, I'm going to kill it and end this once and for all. So he goes to the backyard. We had this Christmas tree farm behind our property. It was like really big, probably like 100 acres. And it was connected to like our backyard and our neighbor's backyard. And between our backyard and then the Christmas tree farm, there were these thick bushes that had little openings under them that you could like army crawl under. So my dad gets down on the ground with his rifle. He starts army crawling under the bush and going into the forest. And then when he stands up, one of those little glowing beings with the triangle on his chest and the red eyes is standing there. And my dad got hit with this like strange kind of like download, I guess is what we call it nowadays, right? He drops his rifle, and he just got this overwhelming sensation flashed into his mind about the suffering of living beings and the importance of not harming other beings, that we have to have compassion and be, kind and empathetic towards the suffering of other people and other animals and other things. And it completely changed his mindset. He never hunted again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I heard that somewhere on one of the interviews with, I think it was with you, that he doesn't even kill bugs or flies or anything.
He doesn't.
I'm the exact same way, actually. I don't kill anything.
You guys will get along.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't. He
That's
doesn't
cool.
kill anything.
It's cool.
He'll get mad if you kill a bug in front of him. But one time there's a snake in our yard. He scoops it up and he puts it in a bucket and he drives it a mile or two down the road and he drops it off. Then an hour or two later, the same snake is back in our yard, traveled all the way. And we're like, Dad, come on, get rid of it.
Right.
But yeah, so it flashed this new way of thinking into his head, and he changed. He became more sensitive. He became more empathetic. I mean, he started crying a lot more, and whereas before he was a really tough guy,
It's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that was basically the end of the original event. And then what followed was, so we get home a few days later. I get off the school bus, right? And I go next door to my grandfather's house because at the time I'm in the 8th grade. My brother Jeremy is in the 9th grade, so he's in high school. And then my sister Emily is in elementary school. So we're at this kind of strange year where we all got out of school at different times. So I would be home for like a good hour, hour and a half by myself. So I used that time to go spend time next door with my grandpa and my grandma. So for almost like the entire 8th grade, I would go get off the bus and then I'd go spend time with my grandma and grandpa. And this day I get off the bus and it was weird. And I get in the door and he tells me, he said, boy, your daddy's been smoking dope. And he was in the woods and he saw green boogerman the other night. And I was like, what?
Boogerman?
Boogerman, yeah.
Okay.
He was a real country guy.
Cool.
Like, we're talking, deep in the woods, North Carolina, like his accent was, the things he said was hilarious, it's like, but
yeah. It brings back memories of my grandfather. I used to hang out with him after school every day as well as an 8th grader. So yeah, it's pretty
another
cool.
little synchronicity.
Yeah.
But he said, boy, your daddy was smoking dope and he saw some green boogerman. I was like, Papa, what are you talking about? And so that night I go and I asked Dad, I said, Papa said this. And he tells me, what happened. And immediately I believed him. I mean, I think every 13-year-old kid believes their father or their mother. It's like inherently you already want to believe your parents. So I never had any issue there accepting what he was telling me. But then to add to that, it was within a matter of days or weeks as a family, we began to see things like what we saw last night, the orbs in the sky. And we would see them a lot of times. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, it would be, we'll see a couple in a night and then maybe a month or two would go by and we wouldn't see him again. And we're all wondering, are we ever going to see him again? This kind of feeling of longing. And there have been many times throughout my life where I wondered, am I ever going to see them again? I hope so. Maybe that was the last time. It was kind of a very unknown thing we were navigating. So we're seeing things as a family. My mom is really not into it. She's very skeptical. And a little bit of background there is we are Pentecostal. So for those who don't know about Pentecostal, it's a very, very strict form of Christianity. Like men have to wear suits to church. Outside of church, just in normal daily life, women are supposed to wear long skirts all the way down to their ankles. They have to cover everything. And they can't wear makeup. They can't wear lipstick, can't have piercings, can never drink a drop of alcohol or smoke a cigarette. You're not even supposed to watch TV with cuss words in it. Like, it's very strict. Never cut your hair. But my sister, I'm not sure if you noticed last night. Well, I guess she had it up, but her hair is really long because she grew up that way. And, she's not that way anymore, but we were talking about this last week. It's like, well, I mean, I've been growing my hair my whole life, and if I cut it, it'd be weird. And I'm like, no, don't cut it. It's, it's beautiful. But that's why she grew her hair her whole life, her whole childhood, because that's how we were raised. Like, you're not supposed to cut your hair. And very, very old-fashioned, strict, Pentecostal upbringing. So you could imagine the shock that we were experiencing when this stuff started to happen, like existentially, right? And my mom had a very tough time with it and still does. She sees things. She sees bone-chilling things. She sees things up close that would make your skin crawl, and she's just like, nah, I'm not into it. It's the craziest thing. And she was very opposed, and she just, she gave my dad a hard time and pretty much forbid him to talk about this stuff around us and said it was, demonic and evil. And my dad struggled with it. So he would pray in the beginning, please let her see something, let her see something. So my mom had some pretty crazy experiences early on where she would see like little shadowy, kind of like cloaked beings run through the house. There's one time she's washing dishes and something like shoved her and it got her attention. And not that it hurt her, that it was malicious, but that it was like, getting her attention. My sister told you this story last night that she's mowing the lawn one night, riding on the riding mower, and she sees these red eyes in the woods, and she jumps off and she runs toward the house. The lawnmower keeps driving, like just all kinds of crazy things in the first 5 years were happening in our house that I would describe as similar to poltergeist activity, not with a negative connotation of the word, but just the kind of thing. Like, for example, we're sitting down at dinner, and the dogs, we had 2 or 3 dogs at this time. They come up to the table. They're begging for food. You know how dogs do. My dad gets up. He puts them outside. He shuts the door. A minute or two later, the dogs are back at the table. And he's like, what the heck? gets up, walks to the backyard, takes him out, lets him outside, shuts the door. And then we're sitting at dinner and the dogs are back at the table. It's like, how do they keep getting to the table? Something's opening the door. There was another time where we had these light fixtures in the backyard that are like these mounted, they look like lanterns, you know, just like back patio lights, but they kind of have this ornamental lantern thing on top of them that you have to like unscrew to get in there to reach the light bulb. There's one time the lights are flipping on and off. Like, you know, the light's on and then we go, no, it's turning off, right? And then we go turn it on and then the light is off. Like someone's just cutting it off from nowhere. And we're like, what the heck? And then my dad walks out there the last time after it had flipped off several times and the light bulb was unscrewed in the fixture that you have to unscrew to remove to, you know, do the light bulb. So like things like that were happening. And, you know, my mom being shoved and we were seeing things. My brother Jeremy locked eyes with a being that was staring at him through the window. We had the craziest things happening in these 5 years.
So the beings themselves are, so from all the sightings that you've seen, that your brother's seen, that your dad, that your mom's seen, what are the different types of beings that you guys have seen? Like, what do they look like? The ones that you mentioned can be around 3 to 4 feet, but then there's also an 8 to 9 feet. And you saw a couple of those on like the same occasion. And so I'm just wondering, like, is this the same race of beings, and they can change forms, they can change shape, they can be light, they can be solid, like what's the full picture of everything that you guys have experienced in terms of what these things actually look like and what they're capable of?
That's a very, very complicated question that will take time to answer. I have seen the ones that are 3 to 4 foot tall. My brother Jeremy and my mom have seen the ones that are very tall. And my mom has seen the ones that are very little. My sister, to my knowledge, has seen the little ones as well. So as far as I know, there are at least 2 or 3 types. The ones that are really short and the ones that are really tall. And then, you know, where we're going to get to a little bit later, there's the one that came in the form of a human-looking woman. Now, I will say this. This is where it gets complicated, right? As we understand them, they are non-physical. And as it was explained to me by a man named Jim Simivan, who is a CIA program director who ran the clandestine operations for the CIA, meaning he literally directed the spy program. He told me one night, we were at a party in Philadelphia, an Easter party of a mutual friend of ours who likes to remain anonymous. And I was asking Jim all these questions. I was only like 21 or 22 at the time, and I was just asking him all these crazy questions. Why are you guys investigating us? What, you know, why do you think this is happening to us? And, you know, he and his wife are like, well, we think you're hybrids. And I'm like, yeah, okay, Jim, come on. Next question. Like, just asking all these questions, right? And I asked him.
They think that you're hybrids?
Yeah, that's what he said.
You and your family?
Our family, yeah, that's what they think.
Okay.
The CIA, yeah.
That's what they currently think still today?
That's what he said.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't put much stock in it, but he said all kinds of stuff, you know? And they were telling us, like, you know, study your bloodline, study your genetics. Yvonne, what's your background? They find out she's Rh negative. They're like, oh my God, you know? And there's all this weird stuff, which, by the way, my mom is Rh negative. Do you know about that? There's all these conspiracies about that. Kind of weird synchronicity there. But they're all like, study your genetics, study your ancestry. There's definitely a reason, you know, why this is happening so frequently to your family, and they think it like goes back to even before lifetimes. They think it's a very they have an interesting take on it. Let's just say that. But he starts telling me that what they know, and what I mean I mean the ones who are in the know. Not the media that's like, you know, UFO over Washington, D.C., or not even the Pentagon guys who are giving reports. I'm talking the small handful of elites who are the key holders to the actual program, to the actual disclosure movement, who know the real knowledge, not the talking heads that they send out to spin a narrative, but I'm talking the core elite, right? What they know is that it is interdimensional, that it is consciousness-based or psychic-based. And what he told me plainly to my face is that they understand that there is a spectrum of existence throughout the universe. And that as we evolve along this spectrum, we become less physical. So we know and understand that humans are somewhere in the middle of the spectrum where we're physical, but we're also half psychic, where we have like the full capabilities of physical manifestation. But then we're right there like teetering over the line of psychic ESP abilities, right? The masses aren't really like well read into this stuff or very knowledgeable or developed with this stuff, but these are dormant capabilities within us. It's a part of our design of our evolution. And they know that as we evolve to the next level, that we'll become less physical, more psychic. And he explained to me that as you go up this continuum is where these beings come into play. And they believe that the lady being, that we can get into a little bit later, this entity that my dad saw in 2012, they understand her to be a godlike race of beings that manifests reality purely from thought, and that just with the thought she could destroy or create a planet or create an entire reality. They can do anything. And that's why the CIA got so involved and knocking on our door and coming in and investigating us and asking us all these questions. Because when we reported that she had appeared, they were like, "Oh my God, we got to get in this now." Because they've been tracking her for thousands of years. The elites, the people, that core small group of people who hold the keys to this knowledge for all of humanity. It's actually a very ancient group.
What would you call them? Like Illuminati or something? Or like?
Yeah, that's a popular understanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
So let's talk about the CIA for a few minutes. There's several directions we could go here. It's good stuff.
Complicated.
Yeah, no doubt. But so the CIA involvement with your family and kind of investigating and tracking you guys, and when did that start? Right after the initial experience in 2007? Okay, what did that look like? Like, how many times have they been to your house? What have they said to you? What's going on there?
Okay, so here's what that looked like. And this is a good segue into the next part of the story, right? So in 2007, this all happened in January. For 10 months, my dad is tormented. Everyone he tells this to, his own wife, his own parents, his sisters, all of his in-laws, all of his friends, everybody except for his children thought he was crazy, thought he was demonically possessed, thought he was strung out on hard drugs, just thought all these terrible things about him. That he was losing his grip. He was a pariah, an outcast, and he's just tormented. Like, who can I tell this to? But I'm afraid to lose my children. Somebody called social services on us. So for a while after this stuff went down, I had a caseworker. My brother had a caseworker. My sister had a caseworker. They were coming and checking on us, thinking our dad's going crazy and they need to, see if they need to take us away, kind of thing. It was really tough, right?
They would ask you questions like if you're being like abused, or if you're what's happening within your family, or what's kind of like that kind of stuff.
They were kind of like, we were young children, so they were really like, for example, I'd get off the school bus and there'd be a guy there who would just sit with me for 3 hours while I played video games and would just ask me questions and just spend time with me and kind of things like that,
Okay.
Like they just really got involved. And it was really tough for my dad. Is the reason I bring that up. And he's sitting here thinking, I'm going to lose my children if I talk about this anymore. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my wife. So he's like, what do I do? What do I do? So for 10 months, he just stops talking about it. Everyone he's told thinks he's crazy, right? And we're watching TV as a family one night, and we see this show called UFO Files. We started watching it for a while because we're thinking maybe we'll learn about what we're dealing with. I mean, you have to think. Facebook came out in 2004. YouTube came out in 2006. We had flip phones, and we couldn't even afford one at the time. I don't even think I think smartphones just came out. Like, the world was not what it is today. We had no way to learn, to Google, to research, to really like figure out what we were dealing with. I mean, we were really in uncharted territory. So we watched this little UFO Files show thinking we'd learn about what we were dealing with. And we see a blurb at the end of an episode. If you've had a sighting, go to MUFON.com and report it. So my dad types up this thing and he reports it somewhere around like October or December or something like that, many months after that first night of 2007. He hits send and he's like, okay, maybe no one will read it, but it's off my chest. It's like immediately that they write back, MUFON, and they're like, we're sending you some packets in the mail. And it was these pages, like these printouts that they had that had these little boxes, kind of like a questionnaire that's like, describe your experience, draw it, draw the craft, draw the being, describe this, describe that, whatever. They send it to him. Dad fills it out. He mails it back. Immediately they get back. They're like, we want to send an investigator to your house. And Dad's like, whoa, this is moving. I don't want this. I didn't want this at all. I just wanted to get it off my chest. And they're ringing him for like a month or two. We want to come out. We want to come out. So Dad finally agrees. He lets the local North Carolina guy come out. His name is really, really nice guy. And very kind, very empathetic to the struggling we've been having, and very sincere. The way MUFON works is it pretends to be a civilian-run, volunteer organization. In reality, it is a CIA thing where they are covertly collecting data on the population by having people crowdsource their paranormal sightings or UFO sightings, and then they get all this data. It's really a CIA thing.
How have you been able to confirm that?
I'm getting into it.
Okay.
I'm getting into it. They really do have local volunteers, right?
Yeah.
It's like the top. Like it's kind of like Freemasonry, right? You have the lower level guys that just want to drink beer with their brothers, and then you have the higher level guys that are obviously way deeper.
Right.
It's kind of like that, where like you have these thousands of local volunteers, right? So we get one of the local North Carolina guys. He comes out, like I said, and he's like, oh my God, this is a full CE4 abduction case. Okay, what's that? Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind. We're like, great. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we could have told you that. But, he goes and reports that to headquarters. In a very short amount of time, the president of the entire MUFON, like across the whole country, the national director, comes out. And he's like, we want to do a Discovery Channel documentary. They do a Discovery Channel documentary. And through that Discovery Channel documentary, we had a hypnotic regression. We had people come out and take radiation samples of the yard. This brings us to an earlier point where when the being was standing in the backyard under the tree, they found that the tree limb was orange from radiation, and it died, and it withered, and the branch eventually broke. But there was radiation. There was radiation in the grass in our backyard where there were some other beings, and they saw small little light craft land, and several spots in our yard had actual radiation. They never showed that on TV, of course. So they did the whole regression thing. All that 4 hours of missing time was, basically, long story short, Dad was able to remember it all, and they got all this amazing data. They showed us pictures where people in the 1950s had also drawn the same exact beings down to the triangle on the chest, the description of the eyes, the shutter blinking, the craft with the spikes. Like, I saw these pictures, and they told us the moment your report came through, we knew that you were telling the truth. Because in the 1950s, these beings were spotted over the White House. And there were several witnesses.
1952.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw the drawings from 1952, and they were showing us, like, we know you're telling the truth, and we want to vindicate you, and we want to present you to the world as, heroes.
So in that instance, the only thing that I know about is the mass sighting that happened over the White House with the craft. But then there were also beings that were spotted in that instance. Okay, okay, and like in Washington at the same time.
I don't know about that. I don't know but I just know that in 1952 there was a major event, and there were witnesses, and there were very detailed descriptions, and they were 100% identical to ours. I'm telling you, I saw them side by side. My dad's drawing, and then their files that they brought in a manila envelope to our house to show us. And they're like, we know you're telling the truth. We want to vindicate you and show you to the world as heroes. And then naturally they didn't.
Right.
They portrayed us as liars. Right. And they fabricated the lie detector test. They tricked my dad, and they're like, be at our hotel at, I don't know, it was like 9 a.m. They all flew in from LA, and my dad hadn't met the rest of the crew in person yet, the Discovery Channel crew. And they're like, show up at the hotel at 9. We're going to, introduce ourselves, whatever. Time goes, but they keep delaying it. They kept like being like, oh, show up at 10, show up 11. Like, they kept delaying it. Then my dad gets there. Some assistant or whatever walks out to the front. She's like, hi, nice to meet you. Come with me. They take him, they put him in a room. Cameras are rolling, and it's like, there's an FBI guy there doing a lie detector test. Now, if you know anything about a lie detector test, it's 5 or 6 questions. They get your baseline, and then they ask you 5 or 6 questions. That's it. What they did was they asked my dad over 30 questions over a span of like 4 hours until he's like falling asleep. He's so bored. They asked him these 30 questions over and over and over and over, and it was making my dad anxious. He's tired. He's bored. He's like, really obviously frustrated. And they got one inconclusive answer on a question that they had already asked dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And they went and they showed that on TV, that he was being a liar.
Wow.
That's how it works. So to answer your question, how did we get confirmed that they were, intelligence? That guy, Jim Simivan, who I told you about, who was the director of the spy program, he was at my house in my backyard. We were having a little bonfire in 2016. And I asked him a lot of the questions that you've asked me, like about, how did we know they were intelligent, stuff like that. And I asked Jim, I said, when did you become aware of our story? Because we met him in 2015 in person. And he had just retired from the CIA. That's important for later. He had just retired in 2015, right? So I'm thinking, maybe he's just top level guy, spy program director. His rank is the equivalent of like a 2-star general. If you know about like intelligence and contractor ranks, they have what's GS, and it's a number. They don't have like major, private sergeant. It's GS1, GS2, GS3, all the way up to like, I think it's like 21 is the highest. His rank was GS19, which if you take their manual and you take that and compare it to like the Army's ranks, it's a 2-star general. So he's like a very high up there guy, briefing the president on the spy program every day. And so I'm thinking like, maybe he just heard about us and, he's got better stuff to do, whatever. So I asked him the question, when did you first hear about us? And he smiled. He grinned really big. And he was like, the moment you sent the report. And he said, I had to wait till I was tired retired
to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 08. Or it was either late 07 or early 08. I think he actually like hit send at the very end of 07. So he smiled and he was like, when you sent the report, he's like, you guys just have no clue. You're the most studied experiencer family in the world. And he wrote that in our book. It's in the foreword. He said, Chris Bledsoe has probably been visited officially and unofficially more than anyone in history by government types, researchers, academics, and so on and so forth. He openly admits it in our book that we're the most, researched UFO experiencers in history. But he told me that to my face. He was like, every intelligence agency in the world is aware of your family and studying you guys. You have no clue. There are labs that are doing experimentation based on you guys. And we're like, whoa. And he was like, and that's why I'm here. Because I want to help. I want to undo a lot of the bad that was done in the beginning. And I feel so sorry for you guys. He said, James Carrion, the guy who did the Discovery Channel documentary, was a low-level spook who was sent to hack you guys up and make you look bad. And I want to undo some of that. So call your friends, invite them over. I called 2 or 3 friends, 4 actually. They came to the house. My brother calls his friends. Get a cousin over. My sister calls some friends. And we had a nice little group in the backyard. And he was like, I want to tell your friends to their face that you guys are telling the truth and help vindicate you guys. And it was pretty cool. We had a little bonfire and he was telling us all these things and we're asking all these questions. And he was a really nice guy about it. But he told me point blank that they were sent to hatchet us to death and make us look like liars.
Has your dad done another lie detector test since then?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we could set that up. I'd be happy to. We know some people down here if he wants to do one like for real,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that if when he comes on the show, or we can skip it, but it's a possibility anyway. What has the CIA also, like, have they threatened you guys? Like, how have they treated you guys over the years?
Also a complicated question, right?
Yeah.
So yes, they have threatened us, but then they've also, I think about it like this. There's 2 sides. I wonder about that a lot, but what I wonder about is like, how deep does it go? because I know that there are at least 2 different factions, maybe, that are spinning narratives, and some of these people in like the CIA and the DIA have literally threatened to kill us. And then some, like Jim, like I've told you about, have been like, you need to tell your story. You need to go write a book. You need to keep doing the podcast. You know, your story has to be told. You have to share it. You cannot sit still. Like, please you need to do this. It's, you know, it's like what you're here to do, and I'm behind you. And then we have other people that are like, if the New York Times was at your door tomorrow with wanting an interview, would you go tell them your story? And Dad's like, well, yeah, I would. And they're like, oh, okay, well, if you tell it in a way we don't like, we could easily put a bullet in Chris Jr. and Yvonne's brain, which Yvonne is my mom. And he's like, and we could run you off the road with a Mack truck. And, you know, no one would know what happened. No one would know the driver was one of ours. And you see your neighbors over there? We have actual agents that are living there watching you guys at all times with cameras pointed on you. We're always monitoring you. I've had people tell us, you know, we are going to be bugging your lamps, your light bulbs, your phones. We're going to have spy satellites flying over in atmosphere, or in orbit, you know, out of the atmosphere, above you, trained on you at all times, watching everything you do. And we have a team of remote viewers, psychic spies, who are sitting in a dark room at all times, spying on you psychically. You know, and we would prefer if you didn't go talk about this stuff publicly, but if you do, it's not a big deal, because everyone's going to think you're crazy and they're not going to believe you anyway. And you're lucky that you didn't tell your story 6 years before, because if you did, we could have just shot and killed you. Now we don't really do that as much anymore. We have different ways to ruin your life. So it's been a mixed bag. Tell your story. Don't tell your story. We'll kill you. Actually, you know, we'll help you. So it's like, I don't know. How deep does it go? I do know that there is a Pentagon program called the Weird Desk that is run by CIA and DIA officials who basically, it's like a disinformation program. And part of what they do is they send people in person, which I've experienced, or my family, and also on the internet. They have people who go out all over the corners of the internet and they monitor conversation about paranormal things, and they sow disinformation and harassment. They do like cyber stalking and all kinds of stuff. So it's a complicated question.
Has anybody ever accused you and your family of being CIA disinformation people? Yeah.
All the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big thing. It's like a regular comment we get. It's like, it makes me laugh.
Yeah. What's the argument there? Like, what are they saying?
Because there's actual, like, legitimate confirmation and photos and real history that we have actually interacted with people in the CIA. Like, I mean, it's happened, you know? So people out there are like, I think that there's a big problem in today's day and age with, you know, I don't know how to say this in a certain way that might not come off, but there's like a big problem with, I think, going way too far into the paranoia side of conspiracies. Like, don't get me wrong. A lot of conspiracies are true. There's obviously elements of truth to all of this stuff that's out. I don't think that every single bit of it is true, but you know, there has to be some truth in, you know, all the popular stuff out there. But I think that for the most part, people go so far down the rabbit hole that they don't believe anything, that they don't trust anything, that they're suspicious of everything. And, you know, people see that we have interacted with people in the CIA, so they're like, oh, they're involved. They're guilty by association. They're a part of it. And it's like, bro, my dad lives in a 600 square foot cabin, you know, because of like hard times. And we have suffered the brutal torment and humiliation of thousands of people calling us crazy, calling us demonically possessed, and you know, just like personally attacking us and insulting us and trying to destroy us. You know, I just don't really care what those people think.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know how to like how to really elaborate any further, like how to prove that, we can't help that they showed up on our door. We were watching TV one night and there's a little blurb, go to MUFON.com, we report it. We didn't know that they were a CIA thing, and they just show up. And they showed up in 2009. And then shortly after that, NASA knocks on our door. And they've just been in our lives ever since. And it's an ordinary part of our lives. For example, Matt, you are the CEO of a really, really large, amazing company. And I'm willing to wager that 99% of the world out there probably can't fathom what it's like being in your shoes, running a major retail chain. But to you, it's normal. It's ordinary life. You're born into it, and it's like that for me, being around all these paranormal things and CIA agents since I was, 15, and NASA and stuff. It's like, it's so ordinary. So it's like,
well, you either run from UFOs or you walk towards UFOs. I had 3 older sisters. They all ran from the business. I walked towards the business, so it's one of those things. I don't know if I was born into it, but I chose it, and I worked hard for 20 years to get to the position to be able to carry on the legacy. But
it's amazing.
Yeah. I think you got one type of an attitude, or you got the other type of the attitude, and it's, you can choose, you can make the choice. But what's the NASA connection like? What has the relationship been like with them? What have they told you guys? What's kind of the story there?
NASA. Yeah, so NASA showed up in 2009. A guy by the name of Hal Povenmire, he just knocks on the door, and I'm like home from school playing video games. And I'm in my pajamas, and I just remember it so distinctly. I'm like playing Fallout 3, and there's a ring at the door. My dad's out in town. He's running errands or doing a little job or something. And I open the door, and it's this super tall guy. He's like 6'7", and he's like, "Hey, is this the Bledsoe residence?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he shows me this lapel, and it says NASA. If you tell an intelligence guy, that it's a badge, they're like, "No, we don't have badges. We have lapels." They have these little laminate, it's like a little laminated sheet inside of a little clear sleeve that has a lanyard, is, what they flash. He shows me his lapel, and it said something like NASA Press Corps. And I'm like, "Uh-oh, Mom, NASA's here, right?" So she's like, "Call your dad." And I call Dad, and I'm like, "Somebody from NASA's here." He's like, "Bring him in, entertain him. I'll be home in an hour." And I'm talking to him. I cannot remember for the life of me what we talked about. It was like 17 years ago. Dad gets home, and they hit it off. And, he was in our lives for 11 years until the day he died. And actually the day he died, well, rather slipped into the coma that day or two later he died in. He was supposed to be on the way to our house to spend Thanksgiving with us. And he fell and hit his head that morning. And we went all day wondering, like, he's going to be here any minute. He's going to be here any minute. And then we get a message from his wife that he had fallen and hit his head and slipped into a coma. It was very sad for us. But so he was coming very frequently over a period of 11 years. Sometimes he'd call. He'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to be in next week. I'm going to stay for 3 days." Okay. He would stay at our house. I would let him stay in my room, and I would go stay in the living room, and he would sleep on my bed. I didn't have to do that, but I didn't mind. And he came dozens and dozens of times. He drove to Fayetteville for my sister's college graduation. He came to one of my brother's birthdays. He came and spent Christmases with us and holidays and many family parties. And he would ask us thousands of questions. And we did later find out when he got much older towards the end of his life, he basically admitted that he was also a CIA analyst at one point. And that he was, something he told us early on was that by the year 2025, everything's going to be on the table. He told me that in probably like 2009 or 2010 or something, that by 2025, everything's going to be on the table, disclosure-wise. And he said over the next, 15 or whatever years until that time, we are going to do what is called soft disclosure. And I'm like, what's that? He said soft disclosure means that we are going to release very, very little pieces of information over time so that the masses can process, so that they have time to adjust to the shifts in understanding. And by 2025, it's all going to be out on the table. And that's interesting that he told us that many years ago, considering what we know today, right? And he basically admitted that he was sent by NASA to completely debunk us. So he showed up covertly, like kind of pretending to be our friend, and ended up falling in love with us as a family and realizing that there was nothing to debunk and that it was all true, which is why he stuck around for 11 years and was coming to family parties. And he was really cool in the end, and it was his job. Have you heard of Blue Book?
Mm-hmm.
Alan J. Hynek?
Yep.
Or J. Allen Hynek?
Yep.
I always get his
Project
name.
Blue Book.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was Blue Book. He was actually the number 2 guy in Blue Book. He
Okay.
was under Hynek. He was
Okay.
he was like his protege. And their MO was when they get sightings or whatever, they show up and they covertly debunk. I'm gonna be your friend. I'm gonna wine and dine you, but I'm gonna get the information out of you and prove you're lying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he proved we were legit. Went and told NASA we're legit. He told us that there were 3 families like us that they were doing the same thing to, that they were like investigating, and he said they had never found anybody like us, that we,
3 additional families.
as far as I understand it,
Mm-hmm,
yeah, never found out who they were, but there were other people like us who were having this kind of intensity of experiences. And he told us that basically, he said, I've been vetting you guys for years, and you guys basically, I know this is weird, but this is what he said. He said, you guys have been chosen for disclosure, that you guys are a really nice family, that you're good people, that you're a model American family. And you're chosen to do this. Like you have to, tell your story. And someday you're going to be the face of disclosure. And we were like, whoa, that's really weird.
Do you think his death was accidental for sure?
Oh, yeah. He was a really old man.
Yeah. Okay.
By the time he died, he was probably like 85 or something.
So the disclosure project then, like what do you know about that? Like what are the details other than that timing on that? Like how deep does that go into the various agencies? Who knows about it? Who's controlling it? Like that sort of thing. What do you know about it?
What I do know about it, based on what Jim has told me, again, Jim is the guy who ran the spy program. So we're not talking some low-level guy. We're talking one of the highest guys in the whole thing, right? What he told me was that it is strictly need to know. So, like, for example, 25 or 30 years ago, maybe more like 35 or 40 years ago, when he first joined the CIA, he was a young guy, probably like in his late 20s or something. He was not read into the program. He was just a regular low-level guy. And he and his wife started having experiences at the house. They had some interactions with a being, and the being like pulled them outside through the wall. And next thing they know, they're like just outside in the cold in their pajamas, and they're freaked out. And the being smiles and kind of like waves at him and disappears. He's freaked out. He goes back to his superiors. He's like, my wife and I had a crazy experience. I need to know what we know. I need to, is there stuff I can learn about this, whatever. And his superior, based on what he told me, was like, you don't want to know. If you get read into this program, you can. But if you do, it will most likely ruin your career. People will think you're a laughingstock. They will not take you seriously. And I'm warning you now, choice is yours. So he's like, I have to know. He gets read into the program. He told me that he believes over time his career in the CIA was guided in a way by some force, maybe a higher force or something that kind of guided him to be on the path that he was. Because even though he was read into the program, he still ended up being like one of the top guys, But he said that, yeah, it's strictly compartmentalized, that you only are read into the program if you have a direct experience or a direct, maybe it's like I don't know the word, like a national security reason or something to know. But they don't all know. There's thousands of CIA guys who are just, maybe they're contract killers. Maybe they're told where to go and they show up with their gear and they do a hit and they dip out. And they're not all. It's like school. You have guidance counselors, you have teachers, you have the principal, you have the gym teacher, you have the janitor. You in any organization, you have such a large spectrum of jobs and responsibilities, and then knowledge set that they have. Not everybody in the CIA, it's not like you see in the movies where they just all are in the know. Like, it's not like that, you know? But, you know, so anyway, we're
Disclosure movement.
Disclosure movement, yeah. So what he told us is that 95% of the experiences that they receive reports on are positive and angelic, like ours. And he's like, you know, we've been so deep into the lies about this that we can't come out and tell it like it is. He said, Ryan, what if E.T. landed in the White House lawn and the president came out tomorrow and said, a craft has landed in the lawn. There's an alien. It comes from another place, right? And people see footage of it and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You know, it's an alien, comes from another place. Pretty simple explanation. It's like people might, you know, be able to expect that, but the reality is it's much more complicated. He said it's not like that. And then what I mentioned earlier, we went into the spectrum of existence and all that. And he said, we know that there's this spectrum of beings and they exist on this continuum of psychic evolution. And he said, we know that they created us, that they are interdimensional. A word that they threw around was ultra-terrestrial. They like that kind of hypothesis by how put off they consider that possibility. But they know that it is interdimensional. He said they exist not from another world, but actually they're here with us. And they've been here longer than us. In fact, they created us. And they are parallel to our reality at all times. And they have communicated to us throughout time through symbolism. And I was like, that's really interesting. You know, being into all the esoteric stuff and whatever. And he said, basically that they are not going to come out and tell the positive version. The government, they simply won't do it. That they can't tell the whole truth of it because they've killed people, they've lied, they have incited mass hysteria and paranoia in the masses. And if the people learn the truth about their involvement with this and how they've, you know, unfolded their narrative, that the people would riot, there would be chaos, there would be hysteria, and the government would lose complete continuity of power. So Jim basically said, that's why you need to go write your book. You need to tell your story. You need to keep going forward because they have to hear the positive version of this too. They have to have choice.
I mean, it's got to be one of the most clear things in the world that these beings or that these crafts. I mean, if they are real, if they are here, if there's any truth to this at all, of course they're peaceful. I mean, they have the capability to destroy the entire planet, to annihilate humanity, but that's not happening. And that's, you know, it's not. So, yeah, it's got to be the most obvious thing in the world that these things are not a warlike species that are here to kill us or a threat in any way. The national security threat is it's a joke. It's just a way to keep the secret going. You can quote national security on essentially everything since the National Security Act of 1947, which, oh, by the way, was established about a month and a half after the Roswell incident, came to be. So, and everybody uses national security to cover up the phenomenon now. You can just say, well, can't talk to you about that because of national security. So, yeah, it's interesting. So when you say they created us, what did you like? Do you have any thoughts on like timeline on that? Are you thinking like you're going back to human evolution in terms of like what I guess what are your thoughts on the creation, and then how does that tie into this triangle that I've got painted on my chest? What's the semblance of the triangle?
Your questions are really tapped in because now that I have to address this question, this takes me back to what actually happened in the missing 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
So a year and a half after the original encounter, so we're talking summer of 2008, that's when we filmed the documentary. And they came and they did the whole regression thing. And then it came out in fall of 2008. So it was almost 2 years after the original encounter that it, that it aired. But what we learned, so for the first year to year and a half after Dad's initial encounter, he would get migraine headaches, and sometimes he would pass out when he tried to think about what happened in that missing time. Because they were all, after a good year or so, they convinced him, like, you were gone. He's like, so he would try to think about what happened, and he would pass out sometimes. I mean, it would cause him these crazy headaches. He would have nightmares, scream in his sleep. My mom was recording him in the early days. He's screaming in his sleep, having cold sweats. Like, it was just a very hellacious time for him. And then when he had the hypnosis, it all unfolded in his memory. Like, it started coming back to him. So if we go back to the original day in 2007, he sees the crafts, right? The two, and then he turns, and then he sees the third one, and it shoots up. What actually happened was my dad got down on the ground, and he hides in a bush, thinking it can't see him. And one of them shoots down and is right beside him. But when it's close, it's like that whitish color. Like, later that night when they're leaving, they see this big white spiky thing, and it's got the rotating spikes of light or whatever. It shows up, and it's like this big white thing, and he's so close he can see that the tip of these spikes of light are like hexagon shapes, and he reaches out to touch it. And then when he touches it, next thing he knows, he's in a dark room, and there's stars all around him, and there's this little light on him, and he's like sitting on a table or in a chair or something, but he's just like sitting there, and these beings, the really tall ones, they approach him, and they tell him, my dad's freaking out, where's my son? Where's my son? And they tell him, we're not going to hurt you. He's safe. We're watching him. We have some things we want to show you. They tell him that they are the guardians, that they serve creation, that they basically tend to Earth like a terrarium or a garden, and that it's an enclosed system. And they showed him other little beings that were like, the way he always described it to me is like a dog mixed with a duck, or, like kind of strange little beings that they were making through evolution that maybe they didn't make the cut. You know what I mean? And that they created us, and that throughout the millions of years that we've been here, they have tended to our evolution so that we don't mutate out of control and go extinct. They are the ones who, tend to our genetic code. They showed him basically the U.S. military shooting missiles into space at them, and that they just disable them. And they basically explained that they don't like us. They don't really have good intentions, but it's okay. They're powerless. They can't do anything about us. And kind of like in a humorous way. And they explained to my dad that there are negative forces that are like a parasite that latch onto your mind, which causes people to go crazy, to it's like demonic possession, right? It's the same concept. Like, there's some sort of negative psychic force that is feasting on our energy like a parasite.
Ego.
Hmm?
Ego.
I think that has to do with it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that it's some sort of mechanism there. But that they keep it at bay to protect us from the dark forces of the universe. They're guardians. They protect us, right? And they showed my dad the pyramids. And then they showed him a massive golden orb as big as the sun. And to this day, we still don't understand what it is, which is why Dad rarely ever talks about it, but I want to talk about it. They showed him this massive golden orb, and they said that it's on its way towards us and that it's returning. And they didn't really say what it was. I suspect that it's, I don't know, maybe some high order consciousness that's coming, that's maybe like, responsible for a lot of the shifts we're experiencing now. I don't know. Maybe it's God. I don't know. I've heard of crazier things, but it definitely said something's coming. So for a while we were like, whoa, is it Nibiru? What is it? But they showed him this, this massive golden orb.
So when he saw the pyramids, was it a vision? Or was he actually like flying over the pyramids?
Flying over.
He was flying over the pyramids.
Yeah.
And so then he would have kept going and then saw this orb.
Oh, it's like, back in space, you see these things, and then, you're at the pyramid. It's like wherever you think you go.
Uh-huh.
They explained to him that the craft works by thought. And they walked him over and they let him touch this little panel and touch it. And then it's like, think where you want to go. And you just could go wherever.
Wow.
And there was these little symbols on it. And ironically, when my dad woke up from his regression, he drew the symbols. They didn't air this stuff on the Discovery Channel, you know? They showed like 30 seconds of the regression, and they aired the most crazy out of context part, which was they're the children coming out to play. But what that was they explained to my dad that the short beings are like children, and that the taller beings are more ancient, and that they're like helping them grow, helping them develop. So they protect them from their environment. So they put them in this little apparatus so that they're completely protected. And they're very playful. They're very joyful. And they let them out, and that, you know, one of them's looking at bottles and sticks and cans. And, you know, that's why I was explaining to you and Ryan last night. They're very playful. They're kind of like children. Do you remember me saying that?
Yeah.
Because they are. They're the powers that be, which, you know, you could argue part of that pyramid structure of power is the Vatican. They've been hiding it in your face for thousands of years, the 9 orders of angels. And we understand that those little guys are the cherubs, that the big guys are like the seraphim.
Okay. Couple of questions, because I want to get back to the orb, but the 8 to 9 foot beings, the more ancient beings then. So I'm having Timothy Alberino on in a few weeks. I don't know if you're familiar, but he did a lot of great work in South America. He's done a lot of great work, period. But in South America, on that village in Peru that was being invaded by 8 to 9 foot beings. Are you familiar with that story?
Are you talking about the Virginia thing?
No, that was a different one. But that was actually a smaller creature that was seen there. But this was happened, I think, about a year and a half ago, maybe something like that now, probably. And this village in Peru was being invaded by these very tall beings, and people were capturing it with cell phone cameras and calling in the National Guard and trying to get protection from them. Anyway, that was something that involved beings that are very, very similar with the red eyes to what you're explaining. And the other thing was, of course, the Las Vegas. There we go.
You know what? I think I did hear about this.
It was terrorizing this village. You know, unless the entire village is just making it up, of course. I mean, but people were suffering injuries, like legitimate injuries from these things. So, and then there was the incident in Las Vegas where the family had something crash in their backyard, and it was, again, they saw a couple of 8, 9 foot tall beings. So it's those are the only other 2 stories that seemed credible to me that I can recall that are similar to the beings that you're describing. So I just didn't know if you were aware of those 2, but
no, I am, and I generally don't pay attention to those kinds of things. Another thing that the CIA, particularly Jim, told us was that 95% of the stories out there are false. That it's by design.
Yeah.
You know, and to be careful what you read. But I am aware that there is a very negative spin on the disclosure story, because they straight up told us they were going to do it. But there's more to why I think that, which if we have time today, we could get into the lady and some of the things that she said. There's actually some things that I forgot to mention last night that she said that would be really good to go into.
Would love to talk about her.
Yeah.
Tell me her name again.
Hathor.
Hathor. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so the triangle then, though, before we move on, talk to me about.
So they said it's creation. It represents creation. And they didn't say much more than that. But throughout time, I've kind of done my own research, and I feel like I've maybe solved the puzzle. And I think it's been hidden in the mystery schools the whole time. But they also had the triangle on their chest. The lady had the triangle on their chest, and they said that it represented creation and that they serve creation.
And the 3 points of the triangle represent?
Well, in my understanding, it's the metaphorically, it's the mother, the father, and the child. Or you could think about it as, in nature, there exists an inherent duality, even in plants and animals, human beings, procreation, right? It takes a masculine and a feminine force to create life. that also exists in the non-physical worlds. It exists in the molecular worlds with positive and negative atoms bonding, electrons and protons. I mean, everywhere you look across every observable layer of reality, there is some sort of dual nature where things bond and create a third thing or a new product. So as I understand things, there is a feminine aspect of the divine that has been hidden from us for thousands of years, and that is, the mother aspect of the divine spiritual forces, the masculine aspect, the father of the divine forces, and we are the third part. We are the children of the divine. We're the created product, right? Yeah, so that's how I understand the triangle.
Well, I want to introduce Rozz. I should have introduced Rozz at the first part of this thing, but this is the first time that Rozz has ever made it onto an episode for us. So pretty cool to be a first. I think he'll be a staple on the show. I've had him since the beginning. I just haven't brought him out yet for anybody. But Rozz was part of our Roswell, New Mexico store remodel, and so they made an extra one, so I brought him in here to the studio, but he's perfectly fitting for this conversation.
I love that, and I think maybe for the holidays he needs like a Christmas hat or something.
He probably does,
and,
yeah.
And as the holidays change, maybe new decorations, but yeah, he's I think he's a great presence here.
Love it. Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, we covered a ton in that first half, man, so I kind of want to get your thoughts on a handful of other topics as we continue and kind of, close out with the second half of the conversation. But, I guess there's a lot of different ways that we could kind of start and go about this thing. We talked a little bit about the CIA and disinformation and kind of the way that they had been treating you guys, your family. What are your thoughts on like some of the main players that are out there in terms of like maybe we just start with the Lou Elizondo or David Grush or like Corbell or like do you have thoughts on any of those characters and like what they if they're legitimate, like the David no, it's not David, but the Greer guy, are these legitimate guys, or do you think that some of these guys are like disinformation people?
Let me say this to start, because it's also a pretty complicated question. With the amount of information that is out there about my family, with the high-level people who have been associated with my family, who've been studying my family, and we've been point-blank told that we are the most seriously researched and investigated case by every intelligence agency in the world that has anything to do with researching, UFOs and the phenomenon. Excuse me. You would think that these people would be knocking on our door, like one of the names you just said, Jeremy Corbell, right? He's like one of the big names in, investigative UFO stuff. I don't know him personally. My dad has met him at Contact in the Desert last year, and I think they might have hit it off. I don't know. I didn't really ask. But you would think that somebody who is so into the topic and trying to, get the scoop and get the story would be trying to get the whole story. So for me, it's a red flag when there's a blackball effect that's happening to us, and this has been confirmed to me recently. I'll tell you off air happily. I just want to be careful about saying certain names of people who maybe I haven't gotten their permission to say. But someone in the government point blank told a mutual friend of ours. This mutual friend of ours was like, and this is a very high profile person right now that when I tell you the name off air, you're going to be like, wow. So this mutual friend of ours was asking this individual, why don't you go to the Bledsoe's house? And he was like, no, we don't want to touch it. We don't want to go there. And the person that I'm talking about is also not a high profile individual as in like publicly any sort of like fame or acclaim or anything like that. It's a very behind the scenes person, but very powerful, very connected individual in Washington and other, the financial sector and things like that. Very, very well connected individual. And this individual was like talking to, you know, Lou Elizondo, this other individual, and people in this space, and began to find that none of them wanted to touch us in an official. They didn't want to, like, in a coverage way. They didn't want to come to our house and do coverage on us. They were like, no, we don't want to go anywhere near that. So this person was telling us, she was like, you guys are definitely being blackballed by the people in this sphere that's covering the UFO subject. And she said, so I had to see it for myself. And she came to our property, had amazing experiences, and it was just like, I don't understand. Like, no, you know, I came here and it's been life-changing and transformative, and I don't understand why, you know, they don't want to touch this. I will tell you this about Lou. My dad met him in person several years ago. He and Tom DeLonge, which I'm sure you know who that is, with Blink-182, they were kind of like courting my dad to join TTSA as a core member. He was going to be invited, I think...
To the Stars Academy, right?
Yeah. If I remember correctly, there were 6 original core members. Not sure of the number, but I want to say like my dad would have been the 7th if he accepted. He would have been brought on. And they were, you know, like really communicating a lot with us back then. I knew about To the Stars and their inception before it was even launched to the public, because like Jim Simivand, our friend who's the spy program director, he was in our backyard getting calls from Tom DeLonge. And then hanging up and telling us they're pairing me with this rock star. Like, think about that. They're pairing me with this kid, how he was kind of acting, talking to him on the phone in our backyard, and like we're coming out with this project. And then, you know, a year later, everyone's, oh my God, there's this project. The headlines are Tom DeLonge leaves Blink-182 to research aliens. I was, you know, watching that whole thing go down, and they were telling us about it, and they were courting my dad. So there was this one time my dad traveled to help To the Stars get exotic metal. So he goes on this trip with them. I think they went to Ohio, if I remember correctly, and they like flew. And there's actually, at one point, I'll show you the picture because I don't know if it's still on their website, but To the Stars had a picture of my dad on their website. It was like the Atom Research Project, and they're looking for, you know, exotic metal or whatever. So my dad had this pretty cool like travel trip with Tom and Lou, and Lou's telling my dad in person, like, you know, I'm behind you 100%. I believe you, you know, and I believe in you. And if you need anything from me, I'm there. I'll help you. And, you know, your story's important. All this stuff, all this, like just gassing my dad up and being positive and all that. And anything you need. If anyone's bothering you, call me. I'll be at your door in 24 hours and I'll protect you. If anyone wants to hurt you or anything like that, I've got your back. Just call. All this praise and, you know, you guys are telling the truth and yada, yada, yada. A few years ago, which granted that was about 8 or 9 years ago, you know, what I'm telling you about, that was 2016, I think. Just a few years ago, he's asked on a podcast, what do you think about the Bledsoes? Publicly.
DeLonge or
Elizondo.
Elizondo, yep.
And Elizondo goes, well, I believe in my heart of hearts he's telling the truth, but I can't substantiate his claims. I can't give you any sort of legitimate, substantiated evidence that he is being truthful, but I think that he is. I think he is. And I think what goes on in his property is similar to Skinwalker Ranch. See, in the intelligence circles, we became known as the Skinwalker Ranch of the East. You're familiar with Skinwalker?
I am, yeah. Yep.
Which is funny when you know, like down the line, we ended up being involved with Skinwalker, and you know we've recorded with their History Channel show. But yeah, so it's like in private he says one thing, but then in public he acts like, I don't know, I think he's telling the truth. Like, come on, dude, you know.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So, and then couple that with the fact that he put out a book where he talks about the blue orbs or the scary meanies. He didn't call them that. That's what me and Dad say to laugh at it. But, you know, they're the scary mean ones and they'll hurt you. Well, come on, man. Where's your evidence? Oh, well, you know, I don't know. But, yeah, so it just makes me sick. Yeah. It makes me sick. The back and forth, the deception, you know, the fact of the matter is, Matt, that they have ample evidence from us, from the people around us, of literal spontaneous healings have occurred. Several, many that are not even in the book. There's only like 1 or 2 in the book. There's a lot more than that. A lot. Cancers. I forgot to even mention, in the original Night of the Experiences, my dad's Crohn's disease was healed. He never had Crohn's disease again after that original encounter. And people have been around us, and they've seen orbs, and there's like times where they fly all around, and crazy things happen, and then people that were with us are skywatching or whatever, and they see the orbs, and then they go back and their cancer's gone, or their stroke symptoms have completely cleared up, or their heart issues are reverted, or they're in relapse of whatever disease. I mean, it's happened over a dozen times. People just, and it's not like we, try to do this, or we, it just happened. It just started happening. Things like that, spontaneous healings. And my point is, they have data about this. They have knowledge of this. They have knowledge of the thousands of interactions that we've had with these beings. And then they talk about, Lou says on a podcast, he can't substantiate our claims. Yeah, you can. You've been with us in private, and you have data, and you've had, covert spies knocking on our door since 2009 trying to debunk us, and then determining that there's nothing to debunk and it's all true. They have like mountains and mountains of evidence of the benevolence and the positivity of this phenomenon, but they only go and they spin the negative. So it makes you wonder, it makes you think, what's the agenda, right?
Yeah, why? Right.
Well, it's exactly like Jim told us. We're not going to tell it positive. We're going to tell it negative. It's too late for us to come out with the truth. People would basically kill us. Like we'd lose continuity of power. We're terrified of the people. That's what they told me. I don't know Grush. I've never met him.
So you have to be concerned then with like something, what's coming out of Lou's mouth, if he potentially could have alternative motives of keeping some false narrative in place. I mean, he's a counterintelligence guy. Like, he was trained in counterintelligence, and now all of a sudden he's this UFO guy. Like, it just seems like a bit too coincidental for me, like to have that guy be one of the faces that we're supposed to be able to trust as a CIA counterintelligence person. I mean, I think he was CIA. Like, yeah. I know he was counterintelligence. So it's like I just have a difficult time listening to him. I'm nothing against the guy personally. It's just there's so many people and so much information out there about this topic, and it gets so muddied that it's like you have to kind of pick and choose who you're going to listen to and who you're going to trust and who you're going to believe. And why anybody would really believe a counterintelligence guy is kind of beyond me.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man. And he seems like a nice guy. I've never met him, but I've got so much skin in this game. I've got so much direct personal trauma and therefore growth that has come from all of this and just the experience. And I care too much to tolerate the BS and the lies and the deception. And that's not what this is about. It's about an awakening for people to a new knowledge, like my shirt says here, a new knowledge, right?
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great merch on your site, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I look forward to, seeing what you come up with.
For sure.
I will be repping that for sure. But
yeah, cool. Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah. So it's like, I can't tolerate the BS, man. I have no stomach for the lies, and it's, Anyway, so I don't really know Grush. Never met him. My dad's never met him. But I take issue with somebody who goes up in front of Congress and openly says, look, I've never seen any of this myself. I have never had any personal direct experience with this myself. But my superior slipped me this dossier that says this, and this. They're hurting people. They're a counterintelligence threat. They're jamming our airwaves. We have reason to be concerned and suspicious and afraid and yada, yada, yada. And everyone runs with it like it's the gospel. But dude, you just said you've never seen this. You've never experienced this. Why should I believe you? It sounds like plausible deniability. They're setting up a way where he can get up there and he can read this document, and he's not technically lying under oath because, I didn't see this stuff. I'm just telling you what I was told, what I read on a piece of paper. It's a smoke and mirror show. There was another name you mentioned. Did I cover them all? You said
Greer.
Oh, Greer. Never met him. I try to not really have too many opinions. I do know that he has like his own meditation protocol called CE5 where they like shine lasers at the sky and they, I have heard reports that they see things and that's great. I like his spin that it's like, a positive thing. I think that he's onto something there, but I don't know him. I know people that know him. And I know people that have been to his retreats and they said that they paid $5,000 for a week there and they went out for 5 nights and they shine lasers at the sky and they didn't see anything. So I just stay clear of that. I don't know. If I ever meet him, then, maybe it'll be a different story. But he has reached out to us before. He wanted us to be in one of his documentaries, and we just didn't feel that it was really anything that we needed to do.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just don't have a stomach for people that are out there lying about this stuff. I think it's too important. I have zero tolerance for it.
Such a muddy topic. I mean, there's so much false information. Do you feel like probably 95% of the information is false then? Are you about in that camp?
I do, and I forgot to mention this part just a few minutes ago when we were talking about Tom and Lou. But something that did occur was when they were trying to make my dad a core member of TTSA. They were offering to produce a movie about us. And they wanted Dad to sign a contract where he would have a monthly retainer fee of $15,000 a month for the rest of his life. They would use the Chris Mellon, Chris Mellon, he's one of the core members.
I do, yeah.
He would fund the movie. And it would be like a big budget Hollywood movie, but there was a catch. It had to be spun in a way that there was reptilians that eat people. And,
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
And so here's what happened, right? Dad flies out to LA and he meets with Tom and he meets with Bill Tompkins, who at the time of Dad meeting him, he was like 93 years old. Do you know who this is?
I don't.
Okay. You know Admiral Byrd?
Yeah.
From the 40s, right?
Yeah.
So they had the whole like fleet go out to Antarctica and they said they saw like saucers and went to the edge of the world and they talked about like there's a 8th continent, right? And all that stuff. Bill Tompkins was involved in that whole story. He was naval intelligence, and the idea that they spin is that he was basically the engineer that designed the spaceships for the secret space program, right? I think it's a bunch of garbage, but it's what they were telling Dad. That we fight wars all throughout the galaxy, and, we've been to the moon, and there's reptilians there with a base, and they flicked us off when we landed, and we never went back because we've been too scared, and there is no God. So what happened was Tom takes Dad to meet Bill Tompkins, and they sit down, and the three of them are talking, and Tom is like, Chris, you need to listen to this, right? And Bill Tompkins starts telling my dad that it's reptilians, there is no God, there are no benevolent beings, that Bill Clinton and the Royals and all these politicians are 9-foot reptilian lizards and they shapeshift, and Bill Clinton is an albino. He's a white lizard. And just all this crazy stuff. And he said, there's 800,000 missing kids a year. Go look at the FBI website. It's the reptilians. They snatch them underground and they take them into these caves. And he actually said, this is going to be a little graphic, but this is what they actually said. This is what they tried to convince my dad and tried to get us to push. If you want to know how they really work. He said their favorite meal is an innocent 8-year-old girl. What they do is their throat and they drain the life force out of their blood. That's what they wanted to convert us to change our story to be, to preach that dark message. And the condition was, we're going to make a movie, but all this stuff has to be in it. And Dad said, no thanks. He didn't want to sell a soul. So people wonder why we're so against the narrative. Well, we have reason to be. We talk to these people in private, and the things they say, it can be shocking sometimes. The actual garbage that they push, and then they, this other individual who I haven't named, they tell us things like, we'll kill you if you tell your story your way. So we very much are only concerned with just, keeping our path straight and telling our experiences as they happen and what it means to us. And I just don't have any tolerance for the BS out there, man. I know that it's very evil. It's a very evil agenda. And that brings us to the lady.
Okay. Yeah. Hathor.
Are you ready to
Yeah.
feel like I
think
covered
I'm
that?
ready. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it.
So in 2012, this was 5 years after the initial encounter, and it was a very tough time for us. At this point, NASA had been knocking on our door. Literally, as I said earlier. So in 2012, my sister comes home crying from school one day. She's in high school at this point, probably like, let's see, maybe like 10th grade. And she comes home on a Friday crying, Daddy, somebody bullied me, about the alien thing. And my dad was fed up. And he said, I'm sick of this. I don't want to talk about this anymore. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but it was Good Friday, right? So it's the weekend of Easter. And he goes outside and he basically curses the sky. And he's like, thank you, God, for this experience and for the healing, but I'm out. I'm not talking about this anymore. You won't let me get pictures, because back in those days, for the first 5 years, anytime we tried to take video or a photo, it would fry our cameras. Dad went through 2 or 3 cameras where when we would see orbs, he'd take a picture, and I'll show you. Like, I literally have pictures. You are more than welcome to, if you want to put it up in the episode and post or whatever. But
let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when he would take the pictures and then he would go look at the picture, it was all blurry, like if it had been melted, the software, and then the camera would flash like something like memory problem or data problem, and it would never work again.
Wow.
And he went through 2 or 3 cameras because of this, right? So he's like, you don't let me take pictures. You don't let me take videos. My kids are being bullied. You don't show up for other people when I need you to. Like, thanks for the healing, but I'm out. I'm done with this. Don't ever come to me again. I don't want to see you ever again. Easter, which was that Sunday, right? So 2 days later, 3 a.m., he hears a voice, and it says, arise. And he gets out of bed, and he's like, he heard this booming voice, right? So he gets up and instructs him to get dressed. So he gets dressed, right? He walks out to the backyard, and there's this being there, one of the really tall ones. And it hands him this thing, and it says, this is your burden, don't lose it. It's this little, like, Dad describes it as, if you imagine a chihuahua, as funny as that sounds, like a little tiny dog. But imagine if that chihuahua had no legs, no tail, no head. It's just like the body. Like kind of this fleshy, round, oval thing, right? Now imagine if it had spikes on it. So he's holding this thing and it's like spiking his hand and gnashing at him. And it's like kind of a really, painful, annoying thing. And they're like, don't lose it. This is your burden. So he takes it and he's like, it's like gnashing at his hand. He walks through the yard back to where our hunting dogs were. If you recall from earlier in the story on that first night, we have the kennel and everything. He gets to where the hunting dogs are. He opens it up. He throws that thing in there. He shuts the kennel. Before I move forward, I want to address the little thing. It was later told to him by these beings that the item was symbolic. That I personally believe, just knowing how these entities work and how they can manipulate reality, I don't know if it was actually a physical thing. I think it was just like completely a symbolic thing. And they said that it represents the natural world. It represents humanity, how we're blind and we don't have a direction, but we're writhing and we're gnashing and we're in pain and suffering right now and we're in fear and we don't know where to go. We don't have a head. We don't have a tail, For many years, people would always comment like, what happened to the thing? What happened to the thing? And so I like to address that. But anyway, so he throws it in the kennel, never sees it again. But when he turns around, there is this ethereal bull, like a really, really big, ghostly bull. And it charges through my dad, and there's this powerful gust of wind, and he's blown back onto the ground, and as he's falling, he sees the stars through the bull as it passes overhead, right? And then he's like on his back, he rolls over to get up on his hands and knees, and he stops, and the bull is gone, and there is this woman floating about 4 foot off the ground. And he said she was about maybe like 4 foot tall, if he estimated her actual height, floating 4 feet off the ground. She has a white gown from her neck to her ankles. It twinkles like the stars. She has a triangle on her chest. She has blonde hair and blue eyes. And Dad always describes her as the most beautiful woman he's ever seen. And she said, you know why I'm here? She said that her name was Hathor. and that she has been known across time and across cultures by many names. She said Amun-Ra, the hidden one, and she gave the name Pitta, which we had no clue what that meant, but that's also an Egyptian deity. And she said that she is the divine feminine, the secret missing part of the Trinity. And there is basically a hidden mother aspect of God. And that since ancient times, the dark force has basically hidden it from us so that we would be completely out of balance, that nature would be out of balance, right? And she said that his story was his burden that he had to tell, all of this, the experiences and everything. And that if he didn't, he would have blood on his hands and he would be guilty because of all the lives that he could have helped, right? She said, you'll be like Joel the Watchman, who, if you know that story, he didn't warn the people that invaders were coming and they died and he was guilty, because he could have helped people. She said there is a dark force in power. They worship. She didn't say the word Satan as far as I understand it, but basically, the evil force that exists. There are people who worship this force. And they are going to basically pull off a mass deception. She said that there is going to be a great deception where they spin this phenomenon as being like evil aliens, and they are going to completely try to convince people there is no God, there is no spirit, there is no consciousness. And she said that when the last soul stops believing in God, that very last soul here on earth, that will be trapped here forever, like an eternal hell. And that this is a perilous realm where we come and incarnate to go on a journey and we learn lessons. And that we are in an illusion, basically, that this is not even the real world. That the real world is the spirit world, where they come from. She said that when you die, you become as we are, like the orbs. And we're free and we go where we want to go. And, that our loved ones are around us and watching over us. And that there are beings all around us in realities that we can't see, that are, existing alongside us, guiding us, some helping us. And, beings in the ocean and beings in other worlds and other realities. And basically that the earth is a living being, that it has a consciousness that is, greater than our own, and it's encoded to protect itself. And that we, existing in a collective state of fear, are harming the earth. And that, if this goes on, that let me just say it's encoded to protect itself, and it doesn't like, how we're harming it. So you could imagine what that would mean if we don't change our course. So she basically said, it could shake us off, but that it won't happen as long as this story gets out there and continues to be told. And there's a great awakening that will occur, and we will shift into the age of Aquarius, and a new knowledge will be brought to the masses, where we can basically come to the realization of what we are, what we're capable of, why we're here, our relation to God and the divine and the beings and all that, and that we will basically like have peace, and it'll be like a completely new way of being, a new way of thinking. And I'm trying to think if I missed anything else. I think that's the gist of it.
Okay.
Basically.
Yeah.
What she said.
That's pretty powerful. And so what would be the catalyst for the change, for the new epoch?
Honestly, I think, okay,
the awakening.
Yeah. I think it's already happening. Yeah. Honestly, I think it's been happening for a number of years. And we were talking about this last night. Like, you look at a clock, right? There's 60 minutes and an hour, and then there's 60 seconds and a minute. So you think about the minute. It's 5 o'clock. Well, is it 5 o'clock in 5 seconds? Is it 5 o'clock in 35 seconds? I don't know. I just know it's 5 o'clock, right? But somewhere in that 5 o'clock, there's 60 different seconds. And then you get even smaller, and there's however many milliseconds in those seconds, and then nanoseconds. So I think like the way the universe works, everybody's like, what's the day? What's the day? What's the day of the Great Awakening? I don't think there is a day. I think it's more like years. And we're so small compared to the scope of the universe, we don't really know exactly how to observe accurately, right? And I think that beginning in 2012 was when the shift began into the age of Aquarius. And that's why I think we had all the end of the world programming, propaganda, and symbolism, and, the whole Mayan calendar thing. And also, they fired the CERN portal that year. And if you really think about it, after 2012, everything started getting absolutely crazy. Like nobody talked about any of this stuff or conspiracies or anything. As far as I can remember, as far long as I've been in this game, meeting thousands of people who are into the fringe, the occult, the paranormal, the supernatural, whatever, I never heard an utterance of anything related to some sort of Illuminati or any of that kind of crap until 2012. That's, in my opinion, when people started to become aware, when the veil began to lift and people began to explore these things a little more regularly. I'm just saying from my experience, being in the middle of this. And then really in 2017, when the government came out and they put out a little blip on the radar and everyone's like, oh my God, they lost their minds, and aliens are real. See, I told you. Nobody talked about it before that. You know who did? Fringe people. Really fringe people. Now, fast forward to a week ago or whatever, 3 or 4 weeks ago, they had that congressional hearing and they talk about that stuff. And now everybody's talking about it. Now, every time I open my phone, there's videos. UFOs in Georgia, UFOs in Israel, UFOs in whatever. It's everywhere. And that's only going to increase. I don't think there is a specific hour or day. I think it's this large kind of zone of time that we really can't perceive, that it's like slowly, like the gears are grinding and shifting over time. And I think every few months or every few years or whatever, there's like another little energetic milestone that's passed where there's some sort of collective shift and our awareness changes even more. And I think we're just heading towards the bottom of a rabbit hole where maybe in a few years' time, we're going to have a completely different way of living. I opened my phone this morning and I'm looking on TikTok, and now we have Tesla and we have some other company that I've never even heard of. Both of them are competing. They're trying to put out these humanoid AI robots. We got AI, we got ChatGPT summarizing everything we do now and accelerating our computing power and our processing and our, our data collection. And like, if people really have eyes to see, we can see that everything is rapidly shifting. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that, Yeah. Yeah. And the beings did tell my dad that there's going to be a point where they reveal themselves to the world. That they are going to provide us with cameras and witnesses so that we can have undeniable proof to show people.
Was there some comment about that potentially being Easter 2026, or where did I hear that number, that date from?
Thank you for reminding me of that. So she said that the age of Aquarius is coming, all that stuff that I said earlier, right? What I forgot to mention, so thank you for reining me in, is she said there's going to be an alignment. The star Regulus is going to align with the gaze of the Sphinx, perfectly level, at dawn in the constellation Leo, or just before dawn. And she said that when this happens, there will be a new knowledge. There's going to be an awakening, And we started telling that to people back in 2012. Told our friends in NASA. The original guy who knocked on our door. And he was an astronomer for like 50 years too. Very, very, one of the original NASA guys. Like literally, when he was in his 20s, just starting at NASA as an intern, he was, working on projects with Werner von Braun. He's literally one of the oldest living legends of NASA. He's dead now, but, I already told that story. He tells us that specific alignment happens in 2026. There's a dispute exactly when that alignment is, and people tell us different things. We've all heard dates in 2026. We've heard spring equinox, we've heard fall equinox, and we've heard around summer solstice. I don't know. The lady didn't say a date. I try not to get too hung up on dates, but for 12 years I've been living my life wondering about this alignment, and 2026 is the number we've been given and all that. So
It's coming up, man.
It's coming up, and the closer we get, the crazier the world gets. So I've been sitting back, kind of thinking like, wow, it really is happening, you know. So
yeah, a lot of crazy sightings and a lot of crazy stuff happening lately. I guess like in the news in terms of the UAP phenomenon, and yeah, I mean, I mentioned the stuff over Trump's golf course where you've got a car-sized UAP hovering for like 12 hours on successive nights, and we've got the Manchester airport thing. I haven't looked to verify like how if people think that these are legitimate or not, or if people are doubting these. I haven't really not had time to research them, but I just know that the headlines. Ryan showed me this one, some orb that was on a runway and then appeared, zipped up to the sky apparently.
I saw that one.
Yeah, yeah. And then this whole Trump golf course thing was pretty crazy. I think this is New Jersey. This is like Morris County or something, where these things are up in the. I guess they've called in the FBI and the CIA to attempt to figure out like whose are these, what are these. It doesn't look like the orbs of light that that you guys have seen and that we potentially saw last night. Like that looks like a straight up vehicle or craft of. Well, that does actually.
Well, they can appear as physical too. We've seen them as metal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that they can completely do whatever they want.
Do you think that any of this is man-made technology? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think some of it is. I do. I think that when you like, for example, a lot of people report seeing, like you told me last night, a black triangle craft. I don't know for sure, but I do think that some of that could be like exotic tech. I know for a fact that we have received technology from them. That throughout time, these beings have, in the guise of crashes, have gifted us things that have advanced our tech. The internet comes from this, fiber optic technology, and all sorts of other things that I'm probably not even aware of, but those are things that were told to me. And one thing that was told to us by a very, very mysterious individual by the name of Tim Taylor.
CIA guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He told us that they found a crashed craft with the book of Genesis on it. And that the symbols have the triangle sometimes, like what my dad, or the craft have the symbol on it, like the triangle, like, the beings have on their chest. And that they sometimes have texts from the Bible on them. So they're aware that this is a spiritual phenomenon. And let's go into Tim a little bit. So after we saw the lady in 2012, I say we, it was Dad. I've not seen her, right? Very few people have in the world. My dad and I get invited to a conference in Asheville, North Carolina, which you might have just recently heard of. It got devastated by the hurricane. Very tragic thing. So we go to Asheville, and there's this small MUFON conference, and we are there, and we're talking, to this crowd of people. And even though MUFON treated us bad, Dad would still go and like speak at their conferences because I think it was cathartic for him to get it off his chest to people that wanted to listen because no one else would, right? So he's talking about his experience with the lady that had just happened weeks before. I had just learned about it on the trip with him to Asheville because it was about a 4-hour drive. I was away in college at the time. I was a freshman in college. I wasn't hearing from him every day. I get home and he's like, I just had this crazy experience. You got to hear about it. There was this lady. And I'm like, what? I had no clue. So he's telling me about it. We drive to this conference, right? He's like telling this experience for the first time publicly. And people in the crowd are heckling him and booing him. We don't want to hear about this. We want to hear about the river from the Discovery Channel. My dad starts crying. These people are just heckling him and they're being rude and they're being hateful. And he starts crying. And then he says, out of nowhere, he kind of goes into this like trance-like state and he says, there's going to be an earthquake off the coast of Baja, California of a 7.0 magnitude this fall. And I think he said something about a hurricane disrupting the elections. 2012 was election year, which is another reason I think it was such a crazy time. It's always crazy election year. People lose their minds and they go literally insane, like a mind virus. But
it gets activated.
Yeah,
it's already there. It just gets activated.
Yeah, absolutely. So he says something like, "There's going to be an earthquake off the coast of Baja California, and there's going to be a hurricane." And there was a hurricane that year. I think it was Hurricane Sandy. And it disrupted the elections in whatever states it hit. And there was an earthquake off the coast of Baja California. I believe it was like a 6.7 magnitude, which is crazy because it was exactly what he said. And there were people there that heard him say that and then saw it come true later, and it was very impactful for them. And they went and reported it to certain people, and they're like, "Oh my God, I was there when he said this," and talked about the lady. So it was like a few months after that. Maybe it was like early the next year or something like that. The CIA really started coming to our property and like wanting to personally, not under covert means, but like have lapels. I'm with the Central Intelligence Agency. Can I come in? Or they call in advance. Can I come? That kind of thing. It's not like they showed up unannounced. They called. They're like, "We want to come," right? So this guy named Tim comes. He has lapels from Area 51, NASA, Air Force, and NRO, which is the National Reconnaissance Office. He tells us he was sent to... This is why I brought this up. He said, "I work for this guy named the Hammer, and I don't really know who he is. I've never seen him before, but the Hammer works for God. And the Hammer sent me here to study you and your family so that I could understand the phenomenon from a religious angle. Because he said, once I start to study it from a religious and spiritual angle, I'll begin to understand the bigger scope of it." Then he indicated that he was in a kind of like a secret group, probably what I'm hinting at there, and that they control the drip of this information to the masses, and that they don't necessarily believe that the masses deserve the full picture and the truth. And he just starts telling us like the craziest stuff, like how they lie to the public and cover up certain things, like stories that have happened in NASA, like the Challenger rocket and how it blew up. And he told us the real story. I can't remember. And the story that they put out is not the full version. And he's just like telling us all kinds of things, right? So he pulls out these pieces of metal, puts them in our hands, one piece in my hand. He's like, "You feel anything?" And I'm like, "No, not really." "Should I feel anything?" He's like, "Just observe." Then he puts another piece in my other hand. And when I'm holding these pieces of metal, I start to feel this energy going through my body. And I'm like, whoa, it wasn't painful. It was like electricity if there was no pain. It's just like this gentle current of energy. And I'm like, whoa, this is, really strange. I was explaining what I felt. And he was like, that's kind of what I was expecting. So we get the rest of the family in there. He pulls us in one by one and tests my whole family, and we all feel the current through our body. He explains to us after he did my dad last, and Dad had the most like aggressive reaction, like it was making the muscles in his arm convulse, and his like vision was blacking out, and it was like really sending this energy through his body, these little pieces of metal. He explained that they are exotic, they contain isotopes that do not exist on Earth, that they estimate that they come from 50 million light years away, the material, and that they are gifted this material. Like it's like they find it at crash sites, or that it just manifests out of thin air. They have this place, I think it's in New Mexico, and I think they call it the Giving Field. And this stuff just pops up and manifests all the time. And he explains to us that it's quasi-crystal, and that when you touch this thing and you have a reaction to it, that it's because you have had some sort of encounter with like interdimensional entities. Like basically he was testing us to see if we were legit. And he said he had only ever seen that kind of energy reaction in 3 other people, where he's gone around and, imagine this, right? You're in the CIA and you go around, you don't tell everybody you're in the CIA, and you have these pieces of metal. Like, hey, look at these little things, put it in people's hands. How many people's hands do you think he's put these little inconspicuous pieces of metal? They don't look that weird. I mean, if I handed it to you and didn't tell you what it was, you'd be like, it's a little piece of foil, right? How many people can you fathom that he's probably handed these things to? It's not like, that hard to fathom, right? And he said out of all the people that he's tested, he's only ever seen a reaction in 3 other people where they actually felt energy through their body. So they have specific ways that they can verify that people are genuinely having experiences with the paranormal or the supernatural, right? So he tells us, he's like, dude, okay, and I've been searching for this. And he looked at my dad and he got in his face. He's like, why you? My dad's like, I don't know. I can't tell you that. And he explains that the lady that my dad saw is an ancient being that has been revered throughout all of history, that has been tracked throughout all of history, that every time there's an appearance of her, it's a major event. Societies all across time and history have worshipped her and revered her as a goddess. He showed us an NRO mission patch, which I can send you an image of it if you'd like, that has, it'd be cool if you wanted to put it in post so people could see, but it's like this Greek-looking goddess that has this purple hair and this kind of like purple or magenta gown, and she has like a trident and like a flame in her hand, and he's like, what do you think this even means? We revere her. Yeah, that's it. That's it, Ryan. They're right there. That's NRO. NRO is a joint op between the CIA, the Air Force, and NASA. And that's who he was with. That was one of the, he showed us this patch, and he's like, what do you think we're saying here? She's been revered throughout all time. And we took it very seriously when you told us that you saw her. And that's why they swarmed us, because we had like a Marian apparition event, this whatever. So, and he told us all kinds of things about like sacred geometry and how they have this. He had an Ouroboros on his shirt. You know about that, right? The Ouroboros, like the serpent eating its tail. He told us it means the never-ending cycle of life and reincarnation. And he told us about the 6-pointed hexagram, which is kind of like people know it as a Star of David. And with the triangle pointing up and the triangle pointing down, it means the masculine and the feminine. And he was telling us all this stuff, and we're like, what is he talking about? We didn't know any of this, kind of planting that seed in our head to study this stuff. And yeah.
What other cultures or civilizations have been aware of this female figure? I mean,
you've got Demeter, Persephone, just Greek names of her. You've got Juno from Rome. You've got Shakti in India. You've got the Lakota called her the white buffalo calf woman. I mean, it goes on and on. Like every culture has some queen of heaven or mother goddess that's, important in their system. And it's honestly like only in the last 2,000 years or so that we kind of lost touch with that in the West, that we forgot about the mother aspect of things. In fact, they intentionally suppressed it when the whole story of Jesus came around and Christianity came to be, everything changed spiritually, like around the world. Like for the last 2 years, that's been the dominant thought, right? And when that whole story came to pass,
2,000.
Yeah.
2,000 years, yeah.
Yep. And they, the powers that be, the Vatican, the emperor at the time, what's his name? It's like the big one, but my mind is fuzzy right now. Constantine.
Yeah.
Constantine legalizes Christianity, and then, Theodosius, in 383, he makes it the state system. And then throughout time, you have these emperors that are changing the creed and the core tenets of Christianity and how the masses are even allowed to observe it after killing the Christians for hundreds of years. So like for anybody that's like, what, elites didn't mess with Christianity? Yeah, they did. They created it, right? They were the ones who took this goddess, this genuine, just matter-of-fact law of reality that there is a feminine force of the divine. They suppressed it, and then they changed it to where, we can still revere her, but it's Mary. She's this little child who had a virgin birth, and, you can revere her, but she's not a god, she's a human. The mother is actually just a human. And they kind of like subverted her and suppressed the feminine and put it down. And that's kind of the way Dad was brought to understand it by the lady. She conveyed to him that it was a dark plan to suppress the feminine and kind of change the story. And
Your dad has moved more towards spirituality, and I wouldn't say away from religion, but it seems like he's more on the spiritual side as opposed to the religious side these days. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
mean, Dad loves Jesus, and he tells me and my brothers, and he told us this one time, and it was the funniest thing. He said, Christianity is just peace, love, and judge your neighbor. You see what I'm getting at? Like, there's you can love the message and the story of Jesus without all the rules and without all the regulations and the creeds and all that. And we have a different way of thinking about things, but it is kind of hard to shake your roots. You know what I mean? But yes, to answer your question, he's very, he's very not by the book.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Do you think that you mentioned alien DNA a little bit in part one when we were talking a little bit earlier, and potentially like that they created us at some point back in human history? Do you think that your family has an overabundance of a different type of DNA potentially than most humans, and that's a part of the reason why you guys are able to experience the phenomenon in such a personal way?
Honestly, I can't tell you that. I'd be lying if I could, but all I can tell you is that when I asked Jim why he thought that this was happening to us, he said, well, we think you're hybrids. And I said, bullshit. I don't believe in that crap. But I've thought about it, and it's like somebody on that caliber in that sort of position of power does not just say things to say things. So there's two outcomes there. In my mind, this is how I see things. There's two outcomes there. Outcome one, he's telling the truth and they really believe it. Outcome two, it's a bald-faced lie, but because he's CIA, he's planting lies in my head because that's what they do. It's disinformation. I do not believe that somebody in that position has the authorization to just go spout nonsense opinions to a person of interest family that they are literally officially investigating on behalf of the Department of Defense. So either he really meant it or it was an intentional lie. Either way, it's weird, right? And he did say that. So I don't know. I didn't really put any stock into it, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know.
What have you you're aware of, like the phenomenon existing in and out of the ocean, and how like they've been said to have been seen descending into the water on a bunch of different occasions? There's that video from one of the U.S. Navy ships. There's thousands of sightings that depict the craft going into the water. Are you like, what's your thought on where do they have a base? Do they have a mothership? Is it underwater? Is it on the moon? Like where is there any sense or any thoughts over the years from your experience, or just like trying to understand or research the subject as to where are they? Do they have a base? Where are they coming from?
The way I understand the beings that at least we deal with, right? I mean, obviously there's the possibility that there are things out there that, just because I've seen one thing doesn't mean that there couldn't be something else out there, right? Now, I'm only aware of what I'm aware of. So I don't really spend too much of my time trying to really fathom other possibilities out there when I'm kind of dealing with what's on my plate. And as you saw last night, it's pretty not that big of a deal on a Wednesday night to go out and see something supernatural. I mean, it's fun. We sit by a campfire and we just, all right, here we go. It's dark, and boom, 50 to 70 orbs. Like we've been pretty busy, is what I'm getting at, right? So, in my experience with these beings that we have been interacting with, that the government has been so vehemently worried about, and the reason that they're interacting with us, and all that, what they have told us regarding the entities, they said that they come from the spirit world. They call it the eternal world. They said that it is the true world, and that that's where we go when we die and in between lives, and that here is only an illusion. It's a perilous world, and we come here just to learn lessons and to grow. It's like a journey, and we are eternal and immortal, and that we never truly die. and our loved ones are watching over us with them, and that when we die, we become as they are, and we go into an orb, and we just go wherever we want to go. And there's not really any time there; it's eternal.
Yeah.
You know. So as far as like bases in the ocean, I don't know. It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, fair
It's
enough.
not my experience.
Yeah, gotcha. I appreciate that. What about the, we talked a little bit about the Discovery Channel documentary earlier, but what about the History Channel documentary that you guys were involved in? That really was a very convincing, I thought, and a well done documentary. Although your sister mentioned last night when we were out that there was some stuff that they actually held back from that documentary. She said that when you guys were able to spot that orb, that was the white orb that was moving in the woods, that they actually had way better footage of that thing that they just chose not to release, that they captured on their big camera, and that it would have been, she didn't really say, but maybe just too compelling or too shocking for people to kind of see. What was it like behind the scenes of that documentary? Like what was notable about what really happened, and what was shown versus what was not shown?
Yeah, that's very good. I appreciate that. I appreciate that questioning. So what it was like being behind the scenes of that was witnessing grown men just break down into tears and just weep because they've devoted months or years of their lives doing Bigfoot shows and ghost shows and paranormal shows and whatever they do, and never seeing a single thing. Zero. Maybe on a highlight of a season hunting for Bigfoot, they hear a twig snap and they all freak out because there was a twig that snapped in the woods and they heard a noise and they got evidence. And then they came to our property and they saw hundreds and hundreds of orbs. They had it's like I think it's called a UFO DAP, and it's like this really advanced camera that sits on a tripod, and it has a dome, kind of like security cameras. It has a dome, and it's like this 360-degree view of the sky, and it's connected to this computer with an AI program that is basically connected to every flight database in the world. And it rules out like military craft, space junk, satellites, anything, airplanes, helicopters, drones. It literally, yeah, that's it. That's it, man. He's on it.
Ryan's the best.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it stands on a tripod, right? So it tracks everything in the sky, and it only records if it is an unknown according to every, flight database in the world, right?
And Ryan, we got to get one of these, by the way.
You should. We want to get one.
Yeah. Check the cost out on those. I'm dead serious. Let's figure out.
I don't think it's that much.
Yeah. Okay.
But I know at the time of filming this, there were only like 10 of them in the world or something. But I think they're like commercial. I think you can just buy one now.
Okay.
But yeah. So they had that out there.
Yep.
And they got hundreds of unknowns. Unknown. It's recording the objects. The thing is, the data spitting out, and then boop, unknown. They had files and files, folders and folders and folders, unknown. They opened one folder. It's a page of 50 unknowns. In the entire history that they had been working on this project, they got one unknown at another location somewhere. They spent 6 or 7 days with us. They got hundreds of hours of footage, and hundreds of unknowns, right? And the thing that you were describing towards the end of the episode with the light in the woods that came close, and all of this stuff. And then it's like, okay, now how do we condense all this into 42 minutes? Right? So they cut the vast majority of it. And when the episode aired, there were only 5 orbs on the episode. Most of the footage they showed was from Dad's Instagram. Imagine that. It is a little strange. Like,
yeah.
Why? Yeah, they took footage from his Instagram for the episode, but like, what about the hundreds of things that you recorded? What about the high definition footage in the woods? I don't know. I don't want to make any assumptions.
What do you think happened? Like, you think it just like got elevated to whoever was producing the show that wasn't there? That some boss that said, we don't want to. It's going to be too controversial. Like, what do you?
We honestly think that maybe there was a decision somewhere high up that was like, this is so spectacular, people might not even believe it. Dial it down. I don't know. I honestly can't. I really don't know because we haven't asked. So like, you know what? There's no point. Thank you for what you did.
Yeah.
You know, like, it was a great episode. I think they were very kind about us, very positive, and it was a wonderful experience. The cast and crew were amazing people, very, very nice people, and we had a great time. And we stressed we filmed it in January, and then it came out in August. So it was like 8 months of agony. Like, what if it's Discovery Channel all over again? Even though they were really nice and all this. And then it aired, and I think the week it aired, we got a message from the director. He was like, Chris, I just want you to know it's a great challenge to take hundreds of hours worth of content and cut it down to 42 minutes and do your story justice, but I promise you it was made with love. So then it came out, and, you know, it was what it was. And I think it was great, all things considered. There just wasn't nearly as much footage as they actually got. But, yeah, we were very happy with it. And we just moved on and filmed again when they wanted us to, and that's that. Now here we are waiting a year and a half for that to come out.
So any idea when that comes out?
I think spring.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that as compelling as the first experience?
Double. Yeah.
Wow.
It's much crazier.
Wow.
It's going to be 2 episodes.
How long were they out there?
So my dad and my sister went and filmed the first part at the Monroe Institute. So I wasn't there for this one. I don't know how long they filmed, but it couldn't have been more than like 3 days or something. And they did some really cool filming at the Monroe Institute. They did more of the brain scan stuff. And the Monroe Institute is an amazing place. We were talking about it last night, but
yeah, I'm going to
go. Yeah, absolutely. And tell them we sent you and we say hello, and they'll appreciate that and love that. But, they're wonderful people, and we filmed there, and they did the whole brain scan thing and spoon bending and all the stuff that they do at Monroe. It was done there, but also like, you know, orbs and sky watching and all that kind of stuff. And, it was very powerful. And then they did another episode, like a part 2 to the finale, in the Everglades. And they went out in the Everglades because this history was like, okay, well, we got this at your property. What if we isolate you to some remote location 500 miles away from your house and get you in the darkest part of the East Coast, which is the Everglades, right? And see what happens. So my dad and my sister show up, and there's like, you know, the crew's like, you know, here's your waders, which you know what waders are. Maybe for those who don't know out there, it's like, you know, the big boots. It's like kind of like overall gear you slip into, and it goes up to half your body, and it's like these rubber suits so you can go in the swamp or in the mud or whatever. They give my dad and my sister waders, and they're like, all right, we're going hiking, and they hike into the Everglades. Crew of people with cameras and flashlights and boom microphones or whatever. They're hiking in the swamp, and they have this guy, Dusty Crumb, who's this really cool guy who is he's part of that show that they do out there. It's a history show, like Swamp People or whatever their show is. I don't know. And they get out there deep in the swamp, and they just have the craziest sightings, like orbs like flying by the camera.
Wow.
Like, I've seen some of the footage because a friend of ours was a third-party contractor filming footage for the production, and he owns the footage. So he showed me some of the footage, and it's like pretty crazy stuff. But oh yeah, there's Dad's Instagram. Oh, look who that is on that picture.
Yeah,
Timber Chat.
Yeah, Timber Chat. Yeah.
Yep.
So, do you have a sense? I mean, are they going to release the good stuff? Are you optimistic about what's going to come out of this episode too, or?
I just hope they air it.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
Yeah. That's a good first step. So what about their equipment? Like, I mean, if I wanted to come visit you guys, me and Ryan, or at your place or in the Everglades or whatever, and we could get a hold of some of the equipment that they were using and not hold anything back, just put absolutely everything that we get, you know, and document it. Like, I mean, would that be a possibility? Would that be something you guys would be interested in?
I say, when are we getting started?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's plan on that. We'll get that done. I want to get your dad down, and I know we talked a little bit about that, and maybe before it gets too buggy and hot down in Florida, we have a trip and your dad comes down and we record here, and then maybe as like a next step, we Ryan and I can research, mostly Ryan will research equipment, and Ryan's my tech wizard. But that sounds like a plan, man. Because I would like to to document this in a bigger way. And I mean, sitting out there with iPhones last night is not, it's not the way to truly, really document it. And we're not going to hold anything back. We're going to put out the information that we get to its fullest. So I think it could be a cool, fun opportunity.
Last night was that was an intimate thing. It was not for documentation. It was for us to enjoy.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we didn't film. I'm glad that we got out there and we just had the intention to hang out. It was our first time meeting. And I'm sure you can imagine the pressure that I feel, which is like, okay, I'm going across the country. I'm meeting somebody. Sure, you're a nice guy. But for me, it's like there's been hundreds of suitors, so to speak, who are like, I want to see. And now we're kind of in the age where those people are starting to be like yourself, who have a platform and an audience. So we always have this thought. It's like, wow, what? And it never has. It's always shown. But there's always that thought in my head, well, what if it doesn't? And then so-and-so goes and says, well, I skywatched with them and I didn't see. That little pressure is always there in the back of my mind. So that's why I brought my sister and my husband, because I think that's why I kept telling you, the more of us together, it took the pressure off me to feel like I have to convince you of anything. And it was really a vulnerable thing for me. And I think it went perfect. I think it went better than I ever imagined. And it was a great time. I had a lot of fun, and we were really blown away by last night. And next time it's time to film.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Cool. Let's do it. Good. Awesome, man. Well, what did we miss? I feel like it's a great episode. A lot of great conversations. What else is on your mind before we
There
wrap
is
it up?
another part of the story that I can quickly cover
All
that
right.
I'm not sure if you're aware of.
Okay.
Well, you've read the book, so you've heard it in little detail. But in 2019, we think about this, at least I do, when I think about our life, thinking back on the 18 years of this happening. I think about this in 3 phases, really. And I think now we're kind of in a 4th phase. My dad always told me growing up, we're entering another phase. And every time he says that, the phenomenon has interacted in a different way. More intensely or more closely or whatever. He gets these intuitive downloads that are like, there's another phase. And right now, we're definitely in another phase. But anyway, so 2019. So first phase was obviously the original experience. And that was the first 5 years, were from 2007 to 2012. We were having lots of experiences as a family. People from all over the country were seeing our documentary on Discovery Channel. They'd reach out to Facebook. I love your show. I'm a big believer. Can I come out? And at that time, we were so desperate for any sort of, connection with people that didn't think we were crazy. We told everybody, come on out. And we would have 15, 20 people camping in the yard sometimes, sky watching with us. Back then it was just like, anybody, come on over. But we call it the 5 years of darkness because we couldn't get photo or video, and our loved ones who we really cared about their opinions the most, it would never appear for them, and we could never have photos or videos to show them. They and it was just a very tough time for us. So 2012 was that next phase where the lady came. From that point forward, we've taken thousands of videos and photos. My dad has probably somewhere around 20,000 videos and photos of, orbs and this stuff. And it's like, how do you post all that, right? He has probably a few hundred on his Instagram. But, and we're kicking around the idea of an official YouTube channel. But anyway, so 2012 was that next phase. 2019 was the next phase. And Dad's out. It's Easter. It's actually the next day after Easter, Monday. Every year something crazy happens for us at Easter. So he's like, what's going to happen this year? What's going to happen this year? This was what? 2012. It's 7 years after the lady, which was an Easter experience. So for 7 years, things had been happening at Easter. 1 year for Easter, my dad's out of town, and my cousin sees the lady in the yard float by, calls my dad, leaves a voicemail. He happened to be with Tim Taylor, who was with the CIA. My dad plays the voicemail, and they all hear it. All the people in the room with him, and they're like, whoa, things like that, right? So 2019 comes around, and he's like, what's going to happen this Easter? Nothing happens. So he's like, bummed, whatever. Monday rolls around. the next day, he goes outside and he's on his pier because he lives on a pond. This orange orb comes from out over the woods and kind of slowly descends and gets about 20 or 30 feet of him in front of him and hovers over the water. And it starts, if the people out there are watching the video and they can see, the orb starts kind of like going up and down like this in a line about 10 feet in diameter. And it starts going faster and faster and faster like this. And as it goes so rapidly fast, the colors are changing from it. He describes it like fireworks, like orange, red, yellow, white. Like it just keeps rapidly shifting colors as it's going in that line up and down, vibrating faster and faster. And a being starts projecting out of it, this 10-foot tall light being. And it told him that the tribulation is coming. And there are tough times ahead that we're going to, basically have to prepare. And he told Dad, you have passed the test because you kept your story about God and you didn't change your story, no matter how hard people tried to convince you otherwise. And we're going to bring you cameras and witnesses. We're going to help you get undeniable proof so that you can show the world and people can help you get your story out. And he said, you'll be blessed and your generations and generations of descendants will be blessed because you did this and you didn't waver. And basically, like, buckle up. Tribulation's about to start. That was April 2019. COVID was right around the corner. But also what's interesting is if you know about the tribulation, it's a 7.5-year period in the Bible, which goes to 2026. So it's just strange. Like, as I look back, there's all these little things that add up, and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of weird. And there's like a 12,000-year-old Hindu star chart that places the end of the Kali Yuga in 2025. Now you have people in the CIA like John Ramirez or Lou Elizondo saying things like there's going to be an impending event in 2027, or one of them says 2025. They keep flirting around that date that my dad put out there. He said in 2012, 2026, after it was given to him by NASA. And then they go out and they're like, actually, it's 2025. Actually, it's 2027. The people in the government, they're perverting the truth, right? They're putting out their own little version to muddy the waters. But it's just crazy, all these details adding up. But
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool, man. I don't think I have any other questions. It's been a fascinating couple of days. It's been amazing to get to know you. It's been really, really cool. You got a great family. Your sister's great. Can't wait to meet your dad. Can't thank you enough for the time and coming out here and coming down and trying a new podcast. I say new, but it's picking up now. It's catching on. So,
yeah.
It's really been fun. Last night was amazing. I'd never seen anything like like those three lights moving in formation like that. That was not expected. So it was really cool to be able to go out and see that. So I appreciate that. If that was a gift, I appreciate the gift, and got a little bit of a gift for you here.
Oh wow, I didn't expect that.
Yep, nothing
Thank
major,
you.
but just for.
Thank you. Yeah. I love the purple bag. You really like purple, don't you?
I like purple.
It's one of my favorite colors.
Yeah, that's my favorite color.
Oh wow.
So,
I hate that I spoiled the surprise.
Oh, all good.
When I
all
asked
good.
about the cup.
No, all good.
This is awesome.
Yeah, man.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Oh yes, dude.
Yeah, it's a great freaking cup.
I love this. This is gonna be my BSS cup.
Cool. And those are available on our YouTube channel actually when this airs.
Oh, and one of the vases.
Yep.
Oh yeah. This is going in my studio.
Thing's 2 millimeters thick, solid granite, transparent to light. So yeah, it's pretty.
You
incredible.
printed it with granite.
Printed
this is
it.
actually granite.
No. The original.
The original.
Granite,
okay.
Yeah.
Wow, dude, this is This is going in my studio.
Sweet.
And there's a book in here.
Yeah. Book that changed my life, man. I think it's the.
Cool.
Yeah. Power of Now is a big. Might tie into some of your stuff actually, some of your work. So yeah, it's all. Yeah. I think you'll enjoy it. Very.
Thank you, man.
Very enlightening.
I really appreciate this.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm very humbled.
Yeah. No.
I think you're cut there.
Oh.
Your kill switch was.
Oh no.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Okay. Yeah. Sweet, man. Amazing episode. We got to do it again. We'll continue this. We're going to get some great evidence in the future. Yeah. I look forward to meeting your dad, but, recording with you guys again. Anytime you guys want to come down, you're welcome. And, we're going to capture some footage, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah. Me too. So good times, brother. Appreciate it.